A sleek city rose against a primitive empire. Those soldiers weren't just clutching AK-47s.
Steam engines roared through those ancient streets. I transmigrated as Valoria's brokest baron just to survive.
I started by brewing moonshine with my serfs to stack my first pile of gold.
It took years, but I finally turned this wasteland into a literal paradise on Earth.
My people look healthy and fat. No beggars here, just endless rows of booming shops. I was just preparing to fleece some rich foreign merchants for every penny they had.
Suddenly, Emperor Richard and his chamberlain, Godfrey, arrived at Edenbrook for a secret inspection.
Their carriage groaned on the ruined mountain paths. Godfrey's face was twisted in pure disgust.
Your Majesty, this Edenbrook is a total dump. It must be some tiny, starving hole.
Richard sat inside, wishing he'd ridden a horse instead of this rattling death trap. Thump! The carriage slammed into a hole, launching Godfrey's head straight into the hard wooden roof.
Richard only survived by white-knuckling the armrests as everything turned into total chaos.
Rubbing his skull, Godfrey screamed at the driver, threatening him with a trip to the gallows.
The terrified coachman didn't speak. He just pointed a trembling finger toward the path ahead. Godfrey followed his gaze, and his eyes nearly bulged right out of his head. He rubbed his eyes, looking back at the mud, then at the miracle before them. A perfectly flat, pitch-black avenue stretched forward, gleaming like polished obsidian under the sun.
Neat stone blocks lined the sides. It was the legendary asphalt road I'd finally perfected.
Richard climbed out, frozen. Godfrey, are you absolutely certain this is still the Edenbrook territory?
Checking the parchment, Godfrey nodded frantically. Yes, sir, this is definitely the right place.
The carriage glided over the smooth road as a soft breeze danced through lush green fields. Richard's tension vanished. A mere frontier baron built a road this magnificent? How very interesting. As they followed the path, another sight left Richard and Godfrey completely speechless.
A massive fortress, standing over 10 meters tall, suddenly loomed on the distant horizon.
The majestic gray walls looked invincible, with the name Edenbrook carved boldly above the gate. Richard flared with rage. He'd fought countless wars, yet never saw a baron with such defenses. He growled low. "Godfrey, how does such a powerful fortress exist within my own borders? Why did your Royal Intelligence Network fail to mention a city of this magnitude to me?" Terrified, Godfrey dropped to the road, begging for mercy. He'd never even heard of this place. Who could have imagined a monstrous fortress was hiding deep within these forgotten mountains?
Sighing, Richard sent the coachman away, and the two walked toward the massive city gate.
3 uniformed guards immediately stepped out, blocking their path and demanding to see their travel papers.
Godfrey lied, claiming they were porcelain traders, while Richard decided to test these strange soldiers.
"These walls are incredible. Did your lord bleed you dry with taxes to build them?"
A guard in the back burst out laughing, shoving his hand toward his partner's face.
"Pay up, buddy. I told you he'd ask about the taxes first."
The other guards sighed, tossed over some copper coins, and turned back to explain everything. These walls are actually fakes. They're just decorated with stone slabs to look impressive. Lord Silas thought dirt looked tacky, so he slapped this together. It was actually quite cheap. Richard chuckled, thinking Silas was just a man of art, and signaled Godfrey to tip them.
Suddenly, the guard's expression turned cold and sharp as he glared at the silver coin.
"Put that away. We don't take bribes or dirty money here in Edenbrook."
Godfrey stood frozen. Are there really guards who refuse free silver? This place is pure madness. They stepped inside and were immediately struck by a silence born from pure, unadulterated awe. Clean, paved streets stretched forever, lined with bustling shops and the vibrant sounds of prosperity. Every commoner glowed with health and vibrant energy. It was shocking. Even the peasants looked well-fed and prosperous. This lifestyle was leagues beyond the miserable slums of the royal capital. At dusk, they reached a grand inn called Traveler's Rest, sporting an official imperial seal on its sign. Richard entered, met by the jolly round innkeeper's warm welcome. Stay in the night? First class is 5 gold coins, second is 3, and third is 1. 5 gold? Godfrey exploded. Is this a bandit hideout? You're totally scamming tourists. The boss waved him off.
Calm down. The Lord himself oversees this establishment.
Lord Silas named it personally. In peak season, you'd be lucky to even snag a basic room.
Intrigued by the Lord's involvement, Richard slammed 5 shining gold coins onto the counter.
He secured the suite. A waiter led them upstairs, serving tea with a respectful bow. Try this.
Our Edenbrook tea is legendary. Just pull the rope by the door if you need anything.
Richard lifted his cup of crystal-clear golden tea. Godfrey took a sip, and his eyes bulged in shock.
This herbal aroma is incredible. It's way better than anything those snobby nobles drink.
Richard took a deep gulp. It was crisp, refreshing, and surprisingly sweet.
Suddenly, Godfrey shrieked from the washroom, "Master, there's a private well in here!"
Richard ran in to find Godfrey hunched over a white ceramic basin, staring in pure awe.
Master, look! Using such fine porcelain for a well is insane luxury!
The opening's a bit tight, though. Godfrey scooped a handful of water and gulped it down.
Exquisite! So fresh and sweet! Richard eyed the strange device suspiciously. Something felt off. He signaled Godfrey to summon the waiter.
When the waiter arrived, Godfrey pointed at the well. "Why is this in our room?" The waiter just smiled.
Masters, that's no well. That is a flush toilet for personal business.
Pull the rope to release the water tank above. It washes the waste away instantly. Godfrey's smile vanished. He stood frozen, looking like he'd been struck by a lightning bolt.
Richard's gaze pierced through Godfrey. Turning a sickly purple, Godfrey stammered, "Where does it wash to?"
The waiter beamed. We have city-wide underground pipes. The high elevation makes it flush lightning fast.
Then we haul it all to the neighboring territory using special water carts.
The Baron keeps waste far away. Otherwise, it seeps down and ruins our sweet well water.
Our water is so pure that even outside nobles travel here just to buy a drink.
Godfrey's stomach did a violent flip. He couldn't hold it back anymore.
He lunged at the toilet, puking his guts out. The waiter clapped. Yes, exactly like that.
You look just like the drunk merchants. After finishing, Godfrey shot the waiter a murderous look.
The waiter casually pulled the rope. With a loud splash, the evidence vanished instantly.
Richard watched, stunned. And how does one clean up after the deed is done?
The waiter produced a brass sprayer. This is a saltwater gun, specifically for the backside. The Baron insists salt water is best. Then he revealed a stash of soft white paper.
Use this paper. Never, ever use those old rough wood chips here.
The Lord finds wood chips absolutely filthy.
One guy used chips, and Captain Brutus literally sewed his cheeks shut. The man has monstrous strength.
Avoid him at all costs. Hearing that, Richard and Godfrey both instinctively clenched their butts.
They spent the night wide awake, staring at the sealing tank and that luxurious white paper.
After a feast for breakfast, Richard led Godfrey out to explore the bustling city streets.
Godfrey kept muttering, ranting about the Lord's insane extravagance and wasting public funds.
Richard snorted. If every lord was this wasteful while making their people this rich, I'd die happy.
Reaching a busy corner, the pair spotted a vendor belting out a bizarre folk tune. He claimed Edenbrook's tea was sweeter than honey.
Godfrey winced as the melody poisoned his ears. Disgusted, he spat a thick glob onto the stone pavement.
Suddenly, an elderly woman wearing a sanitation supervisor's armband lunged from the shadows like a predator. She thrust out 5 fingers, shrieking that spitting in public carried a steep fine of 5 copper coins.
These are the Baron's laws. Defy them, and you'll face the judge at the Lord's court.
Before Godfrey could explode in fury, Richard stepped in and paid the fine without a word. Richard then asked curiously, "Madam, why are there no beggars here?" The old woman's face wrinkled into a grin.
"Our Lord is too merciful to watch them suffer," she chuckled, "so he sent them to the mines."
Richard nearly choked. Merciful? Really? Suddenly shouts erupted from the street about an unfolding lawsuit at court. Intrigued, the pair followed the sprinting crowd toward the imposing Lord's Hall to witness the drama.
The massive hall loomed, dominating the entire area with its sheer, overwhelming scale.
The stone fortress radiated a chilling, majestic aura, far grander than even the capital's Royal City Hall.
Inside, I sat slumped behind a massive oak desk, looking bored as the presiding judge.
Having just woken up, I struggled to stay conscious.
Below me, a tavern owner was tearfully accusing a guard.
My lord Rufus ate my food and smashed 2 ale barrels. He owes me 17 silver coins.
Hearing that, my blood began to boil. My irritation flared up instantly.
I had strictly forbidden my guards from bullying locals. Rufus, you dared to break my law while serving?
I slammed my gavel with a thunderous crack. Rufus collapsed to his knees, trembling with pure terror.
I have nothing left, my lord, Rufus wailed. Guards, give him 20 lashes of the military cane first.
Without hesitation, Rufus stripped off his armor, accepting his fate with a grim, submissive silence.
He bit down as the canes tore into his back, leaving his skin a bloody, broken mess.
Your salary is gone. Sweep the streets for 3 months, I declared. Repeat this, and you are banished.
Despite the pain, Rufus smiled and thanked me for my mercy. Richard watched, his pupils quaking with shock.
This baron looked lazy and played judge like a child, yet his absolute prestige was truly terrifying.
The punished man showed no defiance, only submission. Then Tom whispered weakly, "My lord, what about my silver?"
I shrugged casually. He is broke, Tom. The tavern owner's face crumbled into a mask of total despair.
Then I shifted my tone, leaning in. However, I cannot let my loyal subjects suffer a loss.
I shall visit your tavern tonight and drink 3 cups to boost your fame. Court dismissed.
Tom's despair vanished instantly. He bowed frantically, overwhelmed with joy at the prospect of my visit.
Leaving the hall, I eyed those 2 wealthy strangers. At dusk, I headed to the tavern with my retainers.
Reaching the 2nd floor, I found Richard and Godfrey waiting near the top of the stairs.
I signaled Brutus, who drew a deep breath and released a roar that shook the very foundation.
Tonight's feast is on Lord Silas. The crowd cheered wildly and rushed downstairs to celebrate the free ale.
Tom tried to clear the area, but Godfrey stood his ground like an immovable mountain.
I approached their table, tipping my hat with a charming smile. Mind if I join you 2 new faces?
Richard introduced himself as a porcelain merchant from the capital, hiding his true identity behind a fake name.
My business instincts kicked in. Then you must see my ceramic flush toilets. They are unmatched in quality.
Interested in an order? Richard took a slow sip of tea, letting out a long, contemplative sigh.
Edenbrook is full of wonders, he remarked. This tea alone is something even the emperor hasn't tasted.
I slammed my palms onto the table and stood up, my expression shifting to one of theatrical outrage.
Silence, Sir Richard! How dare you utter such treasonous slander against His Majesty the Emperor?
Richard froze, stunned by my sudden outburst. With tears welling in my eyes, I spoke with burning passion.
The Empire breathes because of the Emperor's legendary conquests. Without him, Edenbrook would be nothing but dust.
If His Majesty cannot enjoy such a fine brew in his distant palace today.
How can I dare to taste it? I splashed the tea onto the floor. God bless the Emperor! Richard stood petrified, his teacup suspended in midair.
Godfrey's eyes nearly popped out. Even the royal steward couldn't match this legendary level of brown-nosing.
My gaze shifted toward Godfrey. True loyalty to the emperor belongs in the soul. Most capital nobles are just 2-faced snakes.
Like savages, really. Swallowing his pride, Godfrey gave Richard a guilty look and joined the chant.
Long live the Emperor! Richard beamed, his face flushing as his respect for me soared.
With the mood set, I struck. In the capital, nobles would kill for a taste of this. Hooked, Richard immediately inquired about the cost. I held up one finger. 10 gold per ounce. Godfrey gasped. That's highway robbery.
I smirked, initiating a masterclass in business. Wholesale is 100 gold per pound.
Once it hits the capital, the price doubles to 200 gold.
Branded Royal Premium. Claim maidens picked it with their lips near gold mines while singing hymns.
Target the elite. Make them feel like peasants if they aren't sipping this at the ball.
Who dare exclude high society? Our Edenbrook motto, forget quality, aim for the price tag.
Make it the costliest. Godfrey hid his face in shame, while Richard felt his head spin.
He was a sheep led to slaughter. Later, Richard sampled our signature Edenbrook moonshine.
Realizing I owned this too, Richard's doubts finally vanished.
He instantly ordered 2,000 gold worth of tea. As we settled up, Tom rushed over.
500 gold total, my lord, I snapped. Are we feasting on solid gold?
Why the cost? Tom pointed downstairs. You offered to pay, and a mob showed up.
They even polished off our greenhouse melons. 10 gold per fruit.
I sighed and signaled Brutus. With a heavy thud, a massive leather sack hit the table.
Count it. Exactly 500. Richard and Godfrey stared, paralyzed by the sight of gold.
500 gold? In a cloak? Brutus grinned. Lord carries 1,000 gold just for pocket change.
It's safer, Richard gaped at Brutus, utterly shaken by the man's monstrous power.
Sprinting with pounds of gold? This man was a literal titan in human skin.
Noon arrived. They met me in a hidden chamber to finalize the deal. The windowless room glowed under the eerie light of oil lamps.
A Latin motto hung there. I defy 1,000 critics, yet serve like a humble ox.
Richard pondered the words. I smirked as Brutus slammed 20 tea bricks onto the table.
Check the quality. Use the Edenbrook crest on your wagons for safe passage through my lands.
I presented 2 ancient-looking scrolls, a sales contract and a strict NDA. Richard's eyes twitched at the brutal legal terms.
Traitors shall suffer rotten tongues and withered limbs.
Drowning in spit? And what's this right of final interpretation clause?
My expression remains stone cold. It means exactly what you think.
Sweating, Richard ground his teeth and stamped his family crest.
I pointed toward a bizarre brass device with a massive horn and a hand crank.
Local custom, gentlemen. Read the deal into the horn to prove your honor.
On my signal, Richard began reading, while Brutus furiously cranked the handle.
A needle etched patterns onto a tin cylinder, capturing every single word spoken.
My custom phonograph. If they ever betray me, I'll play this recording to claim their souls.
Once the recording ended, I promptly dismissed them. The pair was practically ushered out of the hall.
A carriage awaited them. The driver smiled. The Baron's orders, a direct escort to the capital.
Godfrey truly believed I was being merciful in how I handled things. As he boarded the carriage, the driver's hand shot out. 10 gold coins up front.
Godfrey's face turned as dark as a soot-stained pot. I just smirked, watching them vanish.
Little did I know, Sir Richard was absolutely repulsed during his miserable journey home.
Just outside Edenbrook, the heavens opened up in a sudden violent downpour.
The imperial roads dissolved into mud pits, swallowing Richard's carriage with every heavy step.
The driver crashed face first into the filth. Nearby peasants just laughed at the pathetic sight. Even the high and mighty Chamberlain Godfrey was forced to wade into the disgusting muck. Inside the carriage, Richard watched the chaos, a suffocating weight pressing on his heart.
He tossed 20 silver coins and abandoned the wreck, but the capital's outskirts were viler.
Open sewage flooded the paths, mixed with rotten trash and human waste everywhere.
Ragged orphans played in the grime, while a sickening stench choked the very air.
Richard stared at the filth, haunted by memories of Edenbrook's pristine, stone-paved streets.
His pride shattered. He thought winning wars meant his people lived in true dignity.
Standing there as their monarch, he was forced to face a devastating, soul-crushing reality.
He was failing compared to a frontier baron. Meanwhile, back at the royal palace,
Richard entered his study, radiating a deadly aura that made his ministers tremble in fear.
The reports were damning. While the king was away, total chaos had taken root.
Crown Prince Edward hadn't attended one meeting, completely blowing off his imperial duties.
He was busy building a beast park, wasting days on bloodthirsty gladiator matches instead.
Veins popped on Richard's forehead as he stormed toward the arena in a rage.
There sat the pampered Edward, lounging lazily while a tiger tore into its prey. He sighed with sheer, ungrateful boredom. Is this it? How utterly dull and repetitive.
No wars, no glory. Had I been born sooner, I'd be the legendary conqueror.
My father just snatched all the heroic achievements before I even had a chance.
He actually squeezed out a fake tear. Why must I live in his shadow?
Suddenly, a heavy hand dropped onto his shoulder. Richard's cold sneer promised absolute terror.
Since you crave action, why don't you jump in and fight that tiger yourself?
Edward froze, spinning around with a pathetic, trembling grin. Father, I've been very ill.
Richard wasn't in the mood for his son's pathetic excuses or royal games.
He dragged the prince out, armed with a heavy oak staff and a whip.
You wanted glory? Then let's see if you can survive a real training session.
Edward scrambled into a ball, weeping. Wait, I'm still just a growing boy, father.
Growing? You look awfully well padded for a boy in development, Richard sneered dangerously. Strip him. Beneath his royal velvet lay a suspiciously thick padded cotton jacket.
Beneath that, another layer. The guards peeled the prince like a pathetic royal onion.
Clang! A steel breastplate hit the grass. Richard's eye twitched. Take off the pants.
As the layers came off, heavy iron buttock guards clattered loudly onto the grass.
Chain mail and greaves followed. Richard's temper finally snapped like a dry, brittle twig.
You lazy brat! Is this how you use the wisdom of the Empire scholars?
You aren't even fit to shine the boots of that baron from Edenbrook.
Hang him up. Give him the thrashing he deserves. Edward was hoisted like ham. Even then, the brat whined, I'm a victim of fate. This is a misunderstanding.
The whip cracked and Edward shrieked, though he still had hidden armor in his crotch.
He didn't feel a thing. It was a masterpiece of pure cowardly acting skills.
After a dozen lashes, Richard paused. The prince's pitiful screams began to soften his heart.
But as he turned, the wind caught Edward's clothes, revealing metal hidden beneath his torn leather pants.
Richard's eyes burned crimson. Cheating? He hissed. Edward, you've got some nerve.
Strip him naked. He'll learn real pain today. Suddenly, Godfrey stumbled in, breathless and desperate.
Sire, Baron Silas's secrets are out. Richard dropped the whip, his gaze turning freezing cold.
Leave him hanging. No one touches him. Meanwhile, Godfrey began his shocking report.
The file hit the table with a thud. It was my entire life story on those pages.
A prodigy who graduated first at 15, knighthood granted by the late king himself.
Defiant and orphaned, he crossed the wrong minister and was banished to the Edenbrook wasteland.
For 7 years, his reports claimed famine and death, that only 2,000 souls remained.
Godfrey ground his teeth together in absolute fury. The brat was building a private army in secret.
Edenbrook's population has passed 10,000, yet he hasn't paid a single copper in 7 years.
Instead of rage, Richard burst into laughter. A teenage genius turned a hellscape into paradise.
A rare talent indeed. He'll make the perfect mentor for the prince. He will be a formidable asset to the throne.
Richard's eyes gleamed with greed. Godfrey, secure a shop downtown. It's time for a routine.
Pack that tea in royal porcelain, 1 ounce per jar. The price, 50 gold coins.
Godfrey stood frozen. 800 gold a pound? Richard was a bigger crook than Silas. The king was the real thief. The next morning, Godfrey paraded through court, swaying enticingly. He carried a pot of steaming tea, its divine scent filling the entire room. The prime minister followed the aroma like a hungry hound.
Godfrey, what is this magic? Godfrey smirked. Behold, the tears of Venus, a legendary Eastern leaf.
The king's daily brew for vitality. It's the secret to eternal youth and manly strength.
The crowd laughed, but the old nobles, their eyes sparkled with desperate hunger.
Richard sat upon his throne, sipping the tea with the poise of a predator.
The finance minister wailed about floods. 30,000 gold needed, but the treasury was dry.
Unprecedentedly, Richard didn't flinch. He tossed 10,000 gold from his private stash to save the day with a wave.
The court cheered for their benevolent king. They had no idea they were next.
Richard was just fattening them up for the harvest. Soon, the Privy Council erupted.
Lord Ward scrambled to send his clerk. Go, get me the secret of the lion.
An hour later, Oliver returned in tears. My lord, we're broke. It's 50 gold an ounce.
Stocks are limited. Every duke in the city is brawling at the door.
The black market price has already spiked to 60 gold coins.
Ward scraped his pockets bare. Finally, he secured a single precious jar the next day.
The ministers huddled around the porcelain like a divine relic. They brooded in trembling silence.
It was just basic water and leaves, yet Ward tasted pure nectar. Delusion is powerful.
Minister Cedric sighed in ecstasy, his imagination doing all the heavy lifting.
Incredible! This minty finish, it's like a cool breeze from heaven itself.
The medicinal power of Mandray is surging through me, another cried out.
Pure vitality in every drop. 50 gold? Huh, it's a goddamn steal.
Poetic inspiration struck the room. These old men were ready to go bankrupt for more.
Meanwhile, back in Edenbrook, I was busy screaming at my workshop staff.
Which idiot put the hay next to my tea leaves? I roared at the haystack.
Mix those flavors and you'll hang on the city walls to dry. We're shearing the fat sheep in the capital for every gold coin.
Quality is everything. Keep a sharp eye on those medicinal herb ratios at all times.
Scrub away every impurity. Understood, Lord Silas, the workers roared in perfect unison.
Those foolish nobles in the capital will gladly pay for my leftover scraps and cheek weeds.
Looking back at the capital, 3 days later, Godfrey burst in. Your Majesty, everything sold out.
Black market prices hit the stratosphere. We cleared 10,500 gold coins in 3 days.
Richard's eyes blazed red with greed. He paced the room, heart pounding. 10,000 gold!
Those blood-sucking noble leeches are finally useful.
They won't give a copper for disaster relief, but fight for overpriced tea? Prepare the horses for Edenbrook.
Back to Edenbrook. Then Richard remembered the Crown Prince was still dangling in the royal garden.
Godfrey scrambled to release him. After 3 days, Crown Prince Edward was in a complete trance.
Once freed, he roared at Godfrey. 3 days? Do you know what I endured for 3 days?
Godfrey lured Edward to the study, where Richard gave him a cold, pretentious lecture.
Edward yielded with teary eyes. Then Richard delivered one final heartless blow.
Kneel in the corner until I say so, Edward sulked, drawing circles on the floor in despair.
Inspector Oswald arrived next, looking half dead after being summoned through the night by Richard.
Richard cut straight to the bone. How many times have you visited Edenbrook lately?
3 times, Majesty, Oswald whispered, head low. It's just a godforsaken wasteland of poor serfs.
Only 2,000 serfs? Poor?
Richard slammed the table with a thunderous crash.
I just returned from Edenbrook myself.
Oswald collapsed. He never dreamed the Emperor would set foot in that devil's den.
Richard's gaze was ice cold. Start talking.
What did Silas give you to make you betray your king? Oswald crumbled into a sobbing mess. Forehead bleeding and eyes streaming, he begged. Majesty, I'm sorry. I didn't want to lie.
That Baron Silas isn't human. In the corner, Edward's ears perked up. This was world-class gossip.
Oswald wailed, pouring out his soul-crushing grievances.
I saw the hidden wealth of Edenbrook and was ready to report it all.
But Silas threw me in a dungeon. They stripped me naked and tied me up, threatening me.
He brought in a master artist just to paint a realistic portrait of me naked.
It was too detailed, sire. Every mole was there. If I spoke, they'd ruin my name.
They threatened to print thousands of copies and flood the entire empire with my shame.
Richard and Godfrey stood there, absolutely speechless.
Is this the work of a noble? Even bandits aren't this cruel. Oswald continued his lament. They hoisted me before a brass horn and forced me to swear a cursed, toxic oath. I had to confess to unthinkable things. Edward couldn't hold it and burst out laughing.
Richard glared at him. So what? It's just words. Who would actually believe it?
Oswald was a mess of snot and tears. That horn records everything exactly as it sounds.
Silas swore he'd play my voice in every public square. It's like yellow mud in your pants.
Even if it's just mud, the whole world will think it's filth.
Richard and Godfrey felt a sudden terrifying chill. Their own hearts nearly stopped.
The two men shared a look of pure, unbridled horror.
Back in that secret room, Silas had made them swear into that same brass horn, too.
Was the Emperor's own voice now a weapon in Silas's hands? The ultimate blackmail.
Oswald sobbed. Then he gave me a villa and gold. Silas is the true devil.
Richard trembled with a rage that shook the room, ready to deliver a final judgment.
Oswald didn't just take bribes, he practically embraced them as a hobby.
Stripped of his rank and noble titles, he was exiled from the capital. Yet Oswald fled with a grin, thankful to keep his head.
With his career in ruins, he headed straight for a luxurious retirement at his private villa in Edenbrook.
A chilling silence gripped the royal study. Godfrey stared blankly into the void, his lips trembling with mindless mutters.
Good heavens, Silas is a monster. Even the chief of Imperial Intelligence couldn't match the devious mind of a mere frontier baron.
Fuming with uncontrollable rage, Richard began shattering every teacup within his reach.
Edward nodded frantically, desperate to meet this devil baron. Meanwhile, Richard let out a low, predatory growl through his teeth.
Ready the carriage for Edenbrook. How dare he use a miraculous alchemical creation for such wicked schemes?
If he were here right now, I'd personally give him 50 lashes of military discipline.
Days later, fate humbled Richard's pride. I learned he had to race back to the capital in a total panic.
Before he could even settle into his throne, disaster struck, a massive, devastating flood.
A once-in-a-century deluge tore through the Lorraine Valley, shattering 5 massive dams and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless.
The Imperial treasury was so bone dry that even a mouse would starve to death inside.
Richard was frantic, pacing like a trapped animal. To fund the relief effort, he targeted my legendary high-priced tea.
Under the cover of total darkness, the king made his move.
He dragged the prince and Godfrey along, racing back to Edenbrook. I was still snuggling my blankets when Captain Brutus woke me.
My lord, wake up! Those 2 fat sheep from the porcelain deal are back. They're waiting at the inn right now. Fresh prey has arrived.
I threw on my noble attire and rushed to the inn, but the moment I stepped out, a horrific stench attacked my nose. The chubby innkeeper was frantically waving a broken fan at the entrance. I walked up and gave him a swift kick.
You idiot! Did the sewers burst? What's this smell? The man grabbed my leg, wailing about his innocence.
Some drunkard emptied the water tower. Now the flush toilets are completely useless and won't drain.
As I cursed, Richard emerged with his son and Godfrey, all of them clutching their noses in pure disgust. I flashed my best salesman's grin. Sir Richard, I trust the tea business in the capital is booming?
Godfrey sneered, looking utterly miserable. Ignoring him, I led the group to the Silver Moon Tavern for a grand feast.
The moment we sat down, Richard cut the small talk and got straight to the point. Silas, that tea fetched 13,000 gold coins. Now I want 200 pounds. This guy is a total shark.
He's flipping cheap copper leaves for a king's ransom. Talk about a dark heart.
He's a natural-born hustler. I laughed and agreed instantly. Soon the waiter arrived with steaming plates of heavy food.
I gestured to a massive bowl of meat. Dig in! This is my Edenbrook specialty, rustic peasant pork stew.
Edward's face twisted in horror. Pork? That's filthy. Only peasants and serfs touch that garbage.
You're actually serving us this? Wow, this kid's ego is through the roof.
I speared a juicy piece of pork belly and glanced at Godfrey. It was time for a little educational lesson. You've got it all wrong. These are castrated boars. Wild ones are way too aggressive to eat.
Snip their life roots early, and they become docile, fatten up fast, and most importantly,
the foul smell vanishes. I raised my voice, adding, actually, it's the same for humans too.
Think of the court eunuchs, or those Eastern choir boys. Aren't they always so soft, plump, and peaceful?
Of course, pigs don't hold grudges after the snip, but humans, well, that's a different story entirely.
The art of castration is truly a deep and fascinating science. Wouldn't you agree, Sir Godfrey?
Godfrey's face turned pitch black. I could actually hear him grinding his teeth in a pure, silent fury.
Edward was shaking, trying not to explode with laughter, until Richard gave him a sharp kick under the table.
Richard took a bite, and his eyes practically glowed. It was a peerless delicacy. Once we finished, the mood shifted.
Richard signaled Godfrey to reveal a massive Imperial military map across the table.
My heart raced. Just how powerful was this Sir Richard to possess top-secret military documents?
Pointing at the Lorraine Valley with a grim expression, Richard sighed. A massive flood has blocked all my trade routes.
Lorraine's governor demanded 20,000 gold for the disaster, but the royal court is completely broke.
If Baron Silas can tame these waters, his prestige will surely reach the heavens.
I traced the map until my eyes locked onto a narrow mountain pass.
This is Silver Gorge, a place trapped between two massive, jagged peaks.
What if we summoned God's thunder to collapse these mountains and block the flood?
Richard froze mid-bite, while Godfrey stared at me like I was some kind of monster.
Father, I told you we needed a court wizard to summon heavenly lightning.
Silas and I truly share the vision of heroes. Wait, crap, I said too much.
I had secretly manufactured mountains of alchemical black powder to defend against lawless bandits.
That stash was just gathering dust, but it could easily level a mountain range.
If this secret leaks, my reign ends. I quickly laughed it off as a joke.
Heavenly thunder? Ridiculous! I quickly led them on a tour of my booming territory.
Richard asked why a high noble like me was so respectful toward mere merchants.
I pointed at a local tavern to explain basic economics. Raw wheat is worthless.
A merchant turns that grain into fine whiskey, increasing its value 100-fold.
This is the true magic of resource allocation.
Others despise traders, but Edenbrook embraces them. That is why we thrive. Richard looked shocked.
Edward wandered into a bookstore and nearly fainted. Baron Silas versus the Demon King?
The vendor pitched the story. It was a trashy tale about a demonic invasion.
It claimed the Baron used creation rings to save the Emperor's entire army.
50 coppers? My face burned red. Who published my drunken boasts into a book?
Edward sneered at the pages. It is written in the filthy common tongue.
This insults noble dignity and wastes fine parchment. Why isn't this in classical script?
I grabbed the book. What is wrong with the language of the people?
If the commoners can read it, it's a masterpiece. You think words waste paper?
Common tongue takes triple the words, which means my printing workshops must expand.
It creates jobs for papermakers, inksmiths, and typesetters across the entire land.
One book feeds hundreds of families. Even street peddlers can afford meat now.
You call this vulgar? I call this stimulating the entire territory's economy.
Edward was left speechless, and Richard's gaze toward me shifted with profound respect.
That night, Richard crept into my garden. Tessa guided him through the moonlit shadows.
I waited with a glass of wine, playing the mysterious lord perfectly.
Silas, be honest, can you really stop the Lorraine River from flooding?
I set my glass down. You're bold. I possess a weapon called God's wrath.
It can shatter stone and reshake the earth. Richard trembled with sudden hope.
I cut him off. It's lethal. My death squads will deliver it for 50,000 gold.
Richard turned pale.
50,000? I don't have that kind of coin.
Then take a low-interest loan from my bank. He gritted his teeth and agreed.
I leaned in close, my voice turning cold. Blowing the mountain is just the start.
After the flood comes the plague. Rotting corpses are a breeding ground for death.
Once the water recedes, burn everybody. Forget the church's rules on burial.
Reduce them to ash. Then use quicklime to disinfect every inch of the lowlands.
Anyone with a fever must be quarantined immediately. No exceptions for anyone.
Everyone must wear linen masks. Hygiene is now the absolute law here.
If someone dares to spit on the street, break their legs. Richard sat there stunned.
A fire of fanatical admiration ignited in his gaze as he stared at me.
He downed a cup from the table and toasted the Baron's genius. I froze in shock.
Richard, that's mouthwash.
Red-faced, the humiliated king fled the room in a panic.
With the loan signed and tea secured, Richard raced back to the capital overnight.
Chaos followed that duo. On the road, Edward relentlessly begged me to be his master.
Richard bargained. Memorize 10 scriptures, and you will enter the Royal Palace Academy.
The moment Richard returned, the council elders swarmed his door before he could even change.
The finance minister wailed on the floor. Your Majesty, we are completely broke.
The Lorraine floods are devastating. We need 20,000 gold coins for relief.
Richard scoffed. Having mastered the logic I taught him, he saw through their games.
He was finally enlightened. The treasury is empty, and my private vault is bare.
A national crisis is when you lords should prove your loyalty to the crown.
Tomorrow at court, everyone donates. Don't even think of escaping." The minister stood speechless.
Meanwhile, while everyone was distracted by the political storm,
Prince Edward donned rags and slipped into the slums. His entire worldview began to shatter.
Unlike Edenbrook's pristine streets, the capital's outer city was a decaying, massive sewer.
Mud and filth choked the alleys, and a bone-piercing stench filled the air. Edward stumbled in his luxury boots, nearly falling face first into the grime.
As he dodged the puddles, a rotted wooden door suddenly swung wide.
A woman doused his feet in slop mixed with bloody fish guts and rot.
The foul stench triggered a gag reflex. Godfrey rushed out, cursing the woman loudly.
Terrified, the woman knelt in the filth, frantically kissing the dirt for mercy.
"Forgive me, Lord." Guided by a strange impulse, Edward asked what she had thrown.
"Just scrap bones," she whispered. Edward pushed inside the dark, crumbling shack.
The small room was suffocating, heavy with the scent of ancient decay.
A skeletal man lay on boards, looking more like a withered ghost than a human.
Edward pointed at a pot of yellow sludge. "Is this what you eat?"
She showed him a cracked bowl of mud mixed with bitter weeds and chaff.
It smelled of sour rot. This is our family's only daily ration.
Edward stared. It was worse than pig slop. Is this actually edible?
"Your Highness, don't! This will kill you!" Godfrey pleaded in absolute terror. Edward shoved him aside, took a finger of the rot, and forced it down.
Bitterness and sour decay instantly exploded across his royal taste buds.
The rough texture scraped his throat. He couldn't hold it back. Edward retched, tears and bile flowing as the wooden bowl shattered to pieces.
The starving man scrambled to the floor in a desperate panic.
He ate the vomit, crying, "It's food, master. Please, do not waste it."
Edward stood frozen, watching the man crawl through the mud for scraps.
His shame burned hotter than any fever as his eyes welled with tears.
He thought of his palace silks and how he hated his boring education.
He remembered complaining that Edenbrook's fine pork was far too fatty. Yet here his subjects ate filth. "I will study," he rasped through gritted teeth.
Godfrey, give them 10 gold pieces. We are leaving right now.
walking through the ruins, Edward asked, "Was this your life too, Godfrey?" Godfrey smiled bitterly. Highness, having that mush daily was considered a good life.
Edward finally understood the grim truth. For years, starvation was the norm, and this peace was fragile. It explained why so many men desperately mutilated themselves just to survive within the cold palace walls. His knuckles turned white as he envisioned Edenbrook, a paradise of abundance where no one ever went hungry.
A chilling determination sparked in his eyes. He had to return and master the arts under Silas.
With bloodshot eyes, Edward whispered a deadly vow. Who knew a single visit to Edenbrook would change him?
This once lawless, uneducated demon king who ruled the empire with iron and ignored every scroll
was now obsessively studying ancient scriptures late into the night, fueled by a brand new fire.
Meanwhile, chaos erupted at the capital. The Minister of War stepped forward, his face pale with fury.
"Your Majesty, the Lorraine floods are rising, and a cult of rebels has emerged from the shadows."
These traitors are the remnants of our fallen enemies, seeking to tear our kingdom down from within.
Led by a priestess, they've raised an army of victims. Our local garrison is completely outnumbered and failing.
I demand 10,000 soldiers and a massive shipment of gold coins for disaster relief immediately.
The court descended into an uproar over the cost. On his throne, Richard remained deathly silent.
The royal vaults were bone dry. There wasn't a single gold coin left to spare for this war.
With a piercing, cold gaze, the king commanded every noble in the room to open their purses.
The prime minister offered a measly 500 gold, while the other greedy nobles acted like they were dying.
They threw down pennies like beggars. This room of elites couldn't even scrounge up 4,000 gold coins. Richard's face contorted as he fought back a wave of pure, unadulterated royal rage.
I earn more selling tea in 2 days than you pathetic cowards offer while preaching about your duty.
Send 15,000 troops and 2,000 gold coins to the valley. We move now.
Swallowing his fury, Richard issued his orders, knowing he was walking a dangerous, desperate tightrope.
The nobles panicked, claiming the gold wasn't enough, but the king refused to hear another single word.
In truth, Richard was panicking inside. He was betting everything on one single impossible gamble.
His future rested on the miners I sent to the Silver Gorge amidst a brutal, bone-chilling storm. My trusted foreman, Duncan, braved the elements with a fierce, unwavering fire in his heart.
20 men struggled through the mud with explosives, while 200 undercover knights trailed closely behind them.
These were the elite royal guards, handpicked by Richard himself to ensure this secret mission's success.
Commander Valentine once viewed my men as mere filth, but their hidden strength had left him speechless.
My well-fed miners from Edenbrook possessed raw, muscular power that rivaled any trained soldier's elite physique.
In a display of pure brawn, they actually held their own against the king's finest inner warriors.
While the knights gasped for air on the treacherous slope, my miners moved like unstoppable iron giants.
Can we really do this? Valentine screamed over the thunder. Duncan just grinned with wild, manic anticipation.
The Lord promised us 1,000 gold coins each. Of course this is going to work.
I will level this entire mountain today, even if the heavens try to tear us apart.
Fueled by the promise of riches, the miners charged upward until Duncan located the perfect structural weakness. This is the spot. Set the charges right here in the crevice.
They packed the rock with massive explosives, leaving Valentine staring at the thin fuse in utter confusion. How can a little string break a mountain? Valentine doubted, just as Duncan struck a hot flame.
The fuse hissed as the spark raced toward the mountain's heart. Get down! Cover your ears!
Duncan's warning was swallowed by a world-shaking roar as the earth itself seemed to scream in agony.
It was a divine hurricane. Shards of rock were hurled into the heavens by the devastating blast.
The massive peak groaned under the impossible pressure before finally surrendering to the earth's violent upheaval.
A colossal avalanche of stone plummeted toward the raging river with a deafening, thunderous crash.
Massive boulders slammed into the valley, raising 100-foot waves and slicing the floodwaters in two.
The elite knights lay paralyzed in the mud, their souls shattered by a power they could never imagine.
Terrified, they dove into the mud, trembling at a power that felt truly divine. It was as if God's wrath had been unleashed. Duncan just grinned, brushing off the filth.
Move out, boys. One more peak to go, then it's back to Edenbrook for our rewards.
Under the moonlight, the men watched Duncan as if he were a living god. Duncan leveled the southern peak next, perfectly rerouting the raging floodwaters toward the east.
10 days later, King Richard was at his absolute breaking point in the royal court.
Chaos reigned as southern nobles clashed daily over the worsening disaster reports from the valley. Charles finally snapped today, desperate to save his drowning hometown from the rising waters. He dropped to his knees, pointing a trembling finger toward Richard's throne. Your Majesty, our people are dying in agony while this court does absolutely nothing.
What are you waiting for? History will judge your silence as a total betrayal.
A wave of officials collapsed to the floor, begging the king to reconsider his path. Richard's fury boiled over. He stood abruptly, eyes blazing. You dare lecture me, Charles? Since you're so noble, I'll seize your lands and send you to the front lines.
Charles went pale, sweat dripping, as he buried his face in silent, shivering terror.
Prime Minister Ward intervened quickly. Your Majesty, please calm down. But what is our plan?
Richard exhaled sharply, fearing for a moment that he'd placed his trust in the wrong man. Suddenly, a messenger burst into the hall, screaming at the top of his lungs.
Urgent news from the front! Silence fell as Richard snatched the sealed dispatch tube.
He unfurled the scrawl, his eyes widening in pure shock as he read the contents.
After a tense silence, Richard threw his head back and erupted into manic, legendary laughter.
He slammed the letter before Charles, roaring, Read it for everyone to hear."
Charles's hand shook violently. One look at the text, and he broke into a cold sweat.
"The Silver Gorge peaks have collapsed. The river is blocked. The floods are gone for good."
The crisis was over. The entire court stood frozen, as if struck by a lightning bolt.
Mountains crumbling?
Had a god truly descended from the heavens to save them?
Another messenger sprinted in. Victory! The rebellion in Lorraine has been crushed!
With the floods gone, our army charged. The cultists fled in terror at our very sight.
The priestess has vanished. It was a double miracle, and the court erupted in cheers.
Richard smirked at their shocked faces, savoring every second of his absolute political triumph.
2 weeks of insults were worth it. How did you know, sire? Ward asked, shaking.
Richard's lips curled into a mysterious grin as he prepared to drop a total bombshell.
Ever heard of Edenbrook? The man who saved us all is a genius named Silas.
The ministers whispered in confusion. Silas? Who is that? Richard didn't hesitate with his command.
Baron Silas used a divine artifact to save the Empire. His contribution is legendary.
I grant him the rank of Viscount. He shall become the Crown Prince's chief Grand Tutor.
The announcement left the entire room in a state of absolute paralyzed shock.
A viscounty was fine, but a royal mentor? And he's only in his early 20s?
Duke Arthur fumed. Unacceptable. How can a mere youth teach our future king?
And why not? Prince Edward shouted, stepping out from the shadows with newfound confidence.
A single day in Edenbrook changed my entire life and opened my eyes.
I've even mastered those boring Latin texts. Just ask my tutor if you doubt me.
The flustered old scholar stepped forward, bowing deeply before the king in utter disbelief.
It's true! The prince is actually studying. Silence fell. The royal brat had finally changed.
Arthur went silent. If Silas could tame that little monster, he deserved any title granted.
Deep within the Lord's fortress at Edenbrook, I reclined lazily in a plush velvet chair.
Skimming the latest volume of my own biography, Baron Silas Battles.
It was perfect, painting me as a heroic master conquering princesses and realms. I considered forcing the author to write daily updates until Brutus burst in. My lord, the miners are back. I stood up. Is everyone safe?
They're fine, but they brought back some half-dead girl from the road.
Clicking my tongue, I headed to the clinic with my maid, Tessa.
After a quick wash, I was floored. This wasn't some stray. It was a world-class beauty.
Her skin was snow white, her features divine.
And her regal aura eclipsed every noble socialite I'd ever met. No ordinary commoner.
Suddenly, a frantic scream erupted from downstairs, sounding like a dying pig.
My lord, a royal edict has arrived. My heart raced. The king's decree?
That old fox Richard sold me out. I rushed outside to a massive crowd.
A royal herald stood shivering in silk amidst the mob.
Dozens of angry farmers surrounded him, wielding sharpened pitchforks and heavy axes.
Baron Silas, receive your decree. The herald shakily unrolled the parchment to read.
Promoted to Viscount. Report to the royal capital immediately.
The town erupted in chaos. They're taking our lord. We won't allow it.
We can't let him go. Just kill the messenger and bury him.
Dozens of sharp blades were suddenly pressed against the herald's throat.
Terrified, he collapsed into the mud, sobbing and wetting his expensive pants.
Lord Silas, save me, I roared. Everyone shut your mouths.
I'm being promoted, not executed. Put those damn weapons down right now.
The mob reluctantly obeyed, wailing as if they'd lost their own father.
I helped the herald up while signaling Brutus to pay him off.
That idiot Brutus shoved a 20-pound bag of silver into the herald's hood.
The weight slammed the poor man face first into the dirt.
Kicking Brutus aside, I reached into the herald's clothes to help him.
Please take this small token for some ale on your journey.
While acting noble, I skillfully reclaimed my bag of silver and his personal coins, too.
The herald heard the clink of his own money being stolen.
Tears streamed down his face. Lord Silas, why are you doing this?
Safe travels. Watch out for bandits on your way back.
I pocketed the silver as the herald scrambled onto his horse and bolted.
With a messenger gone, I prepared for my capital debut, but a sweet voice stopped me.
Lord Baron, please wait!
It was Bianca, looking absolutely frail and helpless.
I'm Bianca. My family is gone, and I have nowhere to turn.
I'll serve you as a maid to repay my life-saving debt, I scoffed. I know a manipulative fox when I see one. Something about her stinks.
Is she after my gold or my handsome face? I remained cold.
Go home. Tessa, give her 2 silver coins for the road. Let's move.
Bianca stood frozen, her eyes wide with total disbelief.
A legendary beauty like her, rejected? She coughed blood in pure rage. Watching my retreating figure, she steeled her resolve.
Pushing her sickly body to the limit, she desperately gave chase. Lord Silas! I glanced back. This girl really had the nerve to keep coming. Faster! Shake her off!
I grabbed Brutus and Tessa and bolted. Bianca ran until her lungs burned, coughing up a mouthful of blood before collapsing unconscious on the street.
30 minutes later, in the inner courtyard of the Lord's Hall,
Bianca lay on a stretcher, death gripping my pant leg, while sobbing her heart out with her eyes tightly shut.
Father, Mother, I miss you so much. Tessa's eyes turned red at the sight. My lord, she's so pitiful. Why not let her stay?
I just scoffed.
Total act. Keep it up, lady. I knelt down and tried my hardest to pry her fingers off me. Good grief, this little girl's grip was like iron. I couldn't budge her for the life of me. Brutus leaned in. My lord, let me.
I'll just crush her bones. Back off, big guy.
I shoved him away. To beat a scheming woman like this, you have to use magic to defeat magic. I muzzled Bianca's mouth with my left hand and readied 2 fingers on my right.
With surgical precision, I jammed them straight into her nostrils. 1 second, 2 seconds, then she started coughing violently.
Bianca's eyes snapped open. Her face flushed crimson as she struggled wildly, finally letting go to gasp for air.
her eyes flooded with humiliating tears, first rejected, then ignored, and now the ultimate nasal violation.
Could a dignified, legendary beauty like her ever have imagined suffering such a bizarre and soul-crushing humiliation?
Finally awake! I clapped my hands, grinning at her. If you can walk, hurry up and beat it.
Bianca bit her tongue to suppress the urge to murder me on the spot. Suddenly, she dropped to her knees and slammed her head against the ground.
I beg the Lord to take me in. I'll work like a slave.
Seeing her forehead bleed from the impact, I stroked my chin.
If she wants to stay this badly, I'll keep her around for some entertainment.
Fine, I sighed. From now on, you're Tessa's junior maid. A maid's maid, basically. Your salary is 3 silver coins a month.
Just as Bianca was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I changed my tune.
However, your medical bills will be deducted from your pay. Sign this 1-year contract. No leaving until the year is up.
A maid's maid with a mountain of debt. Bianca felt a wave of metallic blood rise in her throat.
Her world went dark, and she passed out from sheer rage. Psst, crying tears of joy, I shrugged innocently.
With that troublemaker handled, I immediately summoned the sheriff and tax officer to prep the territory for my departure.
Once I'm gone, the law of this land follows one golden rule.
If it's not illegal, it's allowed. But anyone who bullies the locals or messes with trade, break their legs and kick them out of Edenbrook.
The moment I finished, Sheriff Cole stepped forward, shaking like a leaf and drenched in cold sweat.
My lord, a few days ago, a dozen royal knights came snooping around. We arrested them as enemy spies.
My vision went black. I almost fell off my throne. Royal knights from the capital? You arrested the king's personal guard?
Did you torture them? No illegal torture, Cole stammered, wiping away his sweat.
We just found the worst bard in the town and made him sing ear-bleeding tunes to them for 5 straight days.
They had a mental breakdown and confessed everything. My head throbbed. You brainwashed the Emperor's secret agents with demonic music for 5 days?
Release them this instant. Give them the finest food and the best wine.
Shove 20 gold coins in their hands and get them out of here. I slammed the table, panicking.
Tessa, grab the 120,000 gold drafts. Brutus, move! We're leaving for the capital right now.
I couldn't stay in Edenbrook for another single second.
If I stayed, these unruly subjects would get me sent to the guillotine. I grabbed the massive fortune, jumped in the carriage, and hauled tail. Waiting for me was the treacherous snake pit of power in the royal capital.
And that weird crown prince who was practically begging me to teach him how to be a real man.
Inside the carriage, I patted the thick stack of gold drafts in my breast pocket.
I was just starting to dream of a life of luxury when the carriage screeched to a halt. Brutus's voice boomed outside.
My lord, armed men in black are blocking the road.
Brutus's loud voice sent a jolt through me. I ripped open the carriage curtain. It was pitch black outside.
It was so dark I couldn't see my own hand. cold wind bit at my neck. I looked closer. What? Assassins?
It was actually a massive crowd of peasants in rags, holding torches and oil lamps high in the flickering light.
I recognized every single face. Old Tom Rufus and the folks of Edenbrook had risen at dawn, flooding the streets.
Instead of shining swords, they clutched simple pitchforks.
Heavy hammers and crude clubs. Shivering in the morning chill, Tom stepped forward, drawing a worn leather flask from his coat.
Inside was warm food, offered with tearful eyes. My lord, please, take this to stay warm on your long journey.
Following his lead, the crowd erupted, tossing fresh eggs and wheels of cheese.
And cured meats into my carriage with desperate love. A sudden sting hit my nose as I fought back tears.
My stubborn, penny-pinching subjects were showing such kindness now. Wiping my eyes with my velvet sleeve, I barked a command. Get back, all of you! You're making me stand out here in the freezing cold!
The wind is making my eyes water, but they didn't leave. They just wailed with even more sorrow.
They knew that once I became the Crown Prince's mentor in the capital, I might never return to this wasteland again.
I couldn't bear another glance, terrified I'd break down and shatter my noble composure right then and there.
I retreated into the carriage's shadows, hiding my trembling face behind an old parchment tome.
To the capital! Upon reaching the inner city, my very first mission was securing a proper estate.
The guild located a grand mansion complete with lush gardens. The owner, a man named Garrick. Sizing me up as a clueless country noble, the greedy old fox prepared to bleed me dry.
He demanded 2,000 gold coins instantly. I just lounged back, chewing raisins with a mocking sneer.
1,000 gold, Garrick. Not a single coin more. The man's posture immediately turned rigid. Lord Silas, this estate is worth 1,800 at least. If you're broke, leave. I didn't bother arguing.
Beside me, Brutus flexed his oiled, bulging muscles, looming over him like an unstoppable man-eating beast.
Garrick's legs turned to jelly. I shot a quick signal to my maid, Bianca.
She sighed, raising the king's sealed edict high for all to see.
I tapped the table rhythmically. Garrick, I heard about that young girl who leaped into the moat because of you.
I'm meeting with His Majesty tomorrow morning.
And I was looking for a juicy story to share. Tell me, do you enjoy owning those casinos?
900 gold now. Fair? Seeing the royal seal, Garrick collapsed, drenched in a cold sweat.
My lord, that girl was merely collateral for a massive debt. Her death wasn't my fault. Besides, I have the finance minister's son, Viscount Julian, backing me.
Would you truly risk offending the ministry for a peasant? I don't even need to sell this place.
Don't try to pressure me with your connections. I rose and gave his flabby cheek a condescending pat. Garrick, 1,000 was such a generous offer. Why make this so difficult for yourself?
He thought I was backing down, but I leaned in, whispering with pure malice.
I'm the biggest scoundrel here, and I won't let some bottom feeder like you outshine me.
Will the minister really protect a dog like you? 700 gold. Garrick's spirit finally shattered.
Facing a madman with nothing to lose, he realized his threats were useless. He surrendered with a snarl.
Fine, 700. I glanced at the well, waving my hand with a look of pure repulsion.
Too much bad luck. Let's make it 600. Garrick fumed, but I just gave him a brilliant smile.
Brutus, show him a trick. Brutus pulled a heavy gold bar from his pack and slammed his palms together.
Crunch! The solid bar was crushed into a flat disc by sheer strength. I tossed the imprinted gold to Garrick. It's art now! That palm print adds value, and consider the rest a performance fee for my night.
That's 500 gold right there. Deal? Garrick's eyes were bloodshot with pure rage.
Clutching the mangled gold, he scrambled away to fetch the deed, his dignity completely gone.
He ran without even packing. I held the deed, grinning. My new home was finally sorted. Before dawn, Bianca woke me with a literal punch to the face. She had zero talent for being a maid.
She fumbled with my noble robes, leaving my belt in a tangled, pathetic knot.
I arrived at the palace gates, but it was a total ghost town. I was dead late.
The foreign minister totally ghosted me, and now my silk pants are literally falling off.
I sprinted through the palace like a madman until I finally hit the throne room. But as I burst inside, I tripped over my own oversized pants. I literally power slid across the floor, landing in a perfect kowtow. Dead silence. Those noble glares felt like daggers. I'm sweating bullets, trying to salvage my dignity. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Your loyal servant Silas greets the Emperor."
Your Majesty's glory conquers the world. Your sword makes the four seas tremble in submission.
I'm finally seeing your divine face. Your kingly aura has me exploding with pure joy.
Forgive my rude entrance. I was just too overwhelmed by your greatness. Punish me.
That epic bootlicking echoed everywhere. The ministers' faces turned green from the sheer cringe.
These honorable nobles had never heard anything this shamelessly hilarious in their entire lives.
"Look up," a thunderous voice commanded. I raised my head, and my brain short-circuited.
Sitting on the throne was Sir Richard, the merchant who bought my tea in Edenbrook.
And that old steward by his side? That was actually his attendant, Godfrey.
The kid snickering nearby was Prince Edward, the one I taught about pig farming. I'm cooked.
The enemies I was looking for were actually the Emperor and the Crown Prince. Richard hid a smirk. "Silas, you're late and dressed in a robe that breaks every rule."
Where is your official court attire? Wait, the messenger never even gave it to me.
My mind raced. "Your Majesty, I was running so fast because I'm so devoted." "But your divine, dazzling radiance literally scorched the clothes right off my back." The ministers couldn't take it. Duke Arthur stepped out, pointing his finger and cursing me.
Your Majesty, this man is an absolute disgrace to this royal court.
He's just an uneducated barbarian using cheap flattery. You can't let him teach the prince.
"This old fossil is trying to ruin my career." I stood up and glared back.
"Who do you think you are, old man? I am the great Duke Arthur."
I haven't broken any laws. Why are you so obsessed with getting me fired?
"Do you think His Majesty isn't worthy of my praise?" My voice echoed with power. "I'm just speaking from the heart. To me, His Majesty is a legendary hero.
The world's #1 knight, a genius in both war and civil affairs.
I pray to the moon every single night for His Majesty's eternal glory."
Can Valoria no longer tolerate a loyal subject who only speaks the absolute truth?
I covered my face, fake sobbing. This world is too cold. I'm shaking with righteous fury.
Hit by my emotional combo, Duke Arthur started stuttering like a broken record.
He couldn't squeeze out a single word. Every official in the room went dead silent.
Trying to argue with someone this shamelessly bold was just a one-way ticket to defeat.
Richard was clearly cringing. "Silas, that's enough. Stop being so disrespectful to the Duke."
I quickly backed off and shouted, "Your Majesty is so wise and sagacious."
Tyrants love flattery, but only a true saint like you stays this humble and clear-headed.
Your incredible self-reflection makes me want to prostrate myself in sheer admiration.
Duke Arthur almost fainted from the stress. Then the prince's mentor, Reginald, stepped forward.
He dropped down on one knee with a very stiff and dramatic thud. "Your Majesty, if this snake teaches the prince, he'll lose his mind and blaspheme everything."
"Fire Silas now, or I'll resign my title." "Wait, fire me? That sounds like heaven." "Please fire me. I'd rather be the boss in Edenbrook than deal with these fossils." I crashed to my knees and shouted at the top of my lungs. The grand scholar was absolutely rad.
"I've got zero talent or virtue. Your Majesty, please dismiss me." The minister stood there, totally speechless. This guy was a total beast in combat, so why surrender now? Emperor Richard just let out a cold sneer.
He saw right through my scheme. Denied. I panicked. "No, wait, I really can't do it. Please reconsider."
Richard finally snapped. He grabbed a heavy brass inkwell from his desk and hurled it straight at me.
Smack! The inkwell shattered right in front of me, drenching my face and body in pitch-black ink.
Richard stood up and roared in fury. "Silas, say one more word of nonsense and I'll have your head." "Don't think I don't know your games. You're becoming the chief grand tutor whether you like it or not."
"Court dismissed." Richard stormed off, leaving the shocked officials staring at each other in silence.
Scholar Reginald left in a huff. Then Sir Tristan approached, ready to mock me while I was down.
I didn't hold back. I spat a thick glob right onto his expensive boots, leaving him screaming like a pig.
I just rolled my eyes and turned to walk away.
Before I could leave, Chief Steward Godfrey stopped me. Lord Viscount, His Majesty wants a private word.
I flashed a fake smile and slid 2 banknotes of 200 gold into his pocket. Lead the way, brother.
I managed to find out the Emperor just wanted to chat and had no murderous intent today.
I stepped into the royal study, my heart racing.
Richard ignored me for a long time, buried in his scrolls. Before he could condemn me, I acted first.
I pulled a thick stack of gold notes from my pocket and held them high above my head.
I know I've messed up, Your Majesty.
This is 86,524 gold coins I saved. Please accept it. Richard just snorted.
Edenbrook is famous for wealth, yet you only brought this tiny amount after 7 years.
Do you take me for a child? I started sweating, pretending to be totally heartbroken. Your Majesty is so perceptive.
I spent everything on roads and sewers. Saving this much required a life of extreme frugality.
Richard took the money, his anger finally fading. He actually offered me a seat.
Tell me, what exactly is this wrath of God? Here it was. He was after my gunpowder.
My face fell with fake sorrow. Your Majesty, that was just alchemical black powder.
The alchemist who made it accidentally blew himself up. This project is a total money pit.
I've wasted 10,000 gold, and it's still a failure. I'm broke, so I had to stop. Richard slammed the table. You fool! You don't stop developing a killing machine like that!
How much money do you need? I'll fund it. I hesitated, then held up 3 fingers. Maybe 30,000?
Richard stared me down. 20,000. You have 1 year. If you fail, I take your head.
My heart was dancing with joy.
I'd already mass-produced the gunpowder. This was pure profit. On the outside, I still looked miserable and half dead.
Richard then changed the subject to the Crown Prince.
Edward is wild and hates studying. Even Reginald can't teach him anything.
How do you plan to handle him? I puffed out my chest and shared my modern philosophy.
Your Majesty, as they say, a small tree won't grow straight without some aggressive pruning.
Discipline is key. A filial son is born from the strike of a wooden stick.
The prince needs the harsh beatings of society. If there are no challenges, we create them.
If he messes up, beat him. If he doesn't, beat him anyway to stop future crimes in their tracks.
I call this tiger mom and wolf dad education. Richard listened, nodding in total agreement.
Well said. I clearly didn't hit him enough. Is this how your own parents raised you?
I looked at the ceiling with a dramatic, tragic expression, feeling the weight of the past.
Indeed, I grew up with constant mixed doubles beatings. They practically injected me with pure adrenaline.
Back home, they still call me the War God. Richard was stunned and tossed me his golden lion crest.
From this moment on, the Crown Prince's discipline is in your hands.
Punish him as you see fit. If he resists, call me. I held that golden token with total satisfaction.
With this, I'll rule the prince's palace like a boss. Richard just stared at my ink-stained clothes in pure disgust. He sent me home, reminding me work starts tomorrow. I enjoyed the carriage ride back in style. Arriving home, I spotted Bianca slacking off outside. Seeing her idol made my blood boil. Why aren't you working?
Quit wandering. Go stand against the front wall. You aren't allowed inside until dinner is served.
Bianca pouted, her eyes burning with resentment as she went to squat by the wall.
Back inside, I summoned Tessa and pointed to my ink-soaked suit. Get me out of these clothes.
Find a master craftsman to frame this masterpiece. Hang it right in the main entryway.
Paint the site of divine imperial ink next to it in gold. Tessa's jaw nearly hit the floor.
My lord, did the Emperor lose his temper? She gasped. This is so humiliating. I just snorted.
You know nothing. This represents the Emperor's boundless favor. Now hurry up and get to work.
As dinner was served, an uninvited guest suddenly stormed into the courtyard, interrupting the peace.
It was old Garrick, the very man whose house I'd recently plundered.
Gripping a sealed letter, Garrick pointed at me, roaring, "Silas, you've messed with the wrong person."
You're dead meat. I kept eating my roast beef, indifferent. Brutus, go give him 2 loud slaps.
Brutus lunged forward like a massive black bear.
He seized Garrick's collar and delivered 2 stinging smacks, turning his face into a swollen mess instantly.
I sneered, trespassing and threatening a viscount. Brutus, search him, see if he's hiding a weapon.
Brutus's massive hands ripped through Garrick's clothes, shredding them into useless rags in seconds.
He pulled a 500 gold imperial draft from an inner pocket. My lord, I found 500 gold coins.
This is robbery! Garrick wailed. I'll sue you in the Supreme Court, you thieves!
Enraged, I grabbed his hair and dragged him all the way to the main gate's entryway. I pointed at the framed clothes. Open your eyes and read the words written there, you dog.
Squinting, Garrick trembled as he read, "The sight of divine imperial ink?" I smirked. "So you can read. Think this view is free? Consider those 500 gold your admission fee."
Get out! He was tossed like a sack of garbage.
Brutus threw Garrick into the street, ending the farce. Tessa retrieved the letter he'd dropped.
It was an invitation to the Silver Swan Salon, sent by Julian, the finance minister's son.
Clearly a trap. I was about to use it as toilet paper when Bianca timidly approached me.
My lord, this invitation is from the finance minister's own mansion.
Lesser nobles would die for this. Why not just sell it for a fortune?
My eyes widened. This girl actually has quite the head for business.
I offered her a commission and told her to sell the invite on the black market tomorrow.
Next morning, I donned my fresh formal wear and headed straight for the royal court.
Exhausted from the night before, I leaned against a pillar and fell asleep right then and there.
After court, Chief Godfrey woke me and had me escorted to the Crown Prince's private academy.
Entering the courtyard, I saw a crowd of attendants surrounding someone walking my way.
It was Prince Edward himself, though he looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward.
With a bruised nose and swollen face, he looked like a beaten thug. Seeing me, he brightened instantly.
Silas, you're here! I've missed you!
I channeled my inner actor and grasped his hand enthusiastically.
Your Highness, seeing you was like witnessing a legendary dragon knight descending from the heavens.
To think I'm standing before the glorious Crown Prince himself.
Utterly magnificent. Nearby attendants turned away, cringing at my blatant, shameless brown-nosing. But Edward was absolutely moved to tears. Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Meeting you was like finding destiny. Edward dragged me inside, his face covered in fresh bruises, wincing with every breath. Silas, you've got to save me. I have no idea what possessed my father yesterday. He hung me up and thrashed me with an oak rod, the Crown Prince wailed, clutching his swollen face while drowning in tears. Inside, I was celebrating. It turns out the Emperor's execution speed is absolutely legendary.
I only suggested that tough love builds character yesterday, and he already went to town on him last night.
But I played the part, slapping my knee in fake despair. Your Highness, you've got it all wrong. This wasn't a beating.
This is a father's ultimate expression of love. Edward froze, baffled. I just kept shamelessly spinning my web of lies.
You used to look like a soft, pretty boy. Honestly, your face was just a bit too delicate.
But with these scars, they've unleashed an explosion of raw masculine energy.
This battle-worn aesthetic screams authority. It makes men want to follow you into hell. His Majesty is forging you into a legend.
My silver tongue worked like a charm. Edward touched his face, a goofy grin spreading across his battered lips.
Do you really think so? I always knew I had the soul of a born knight commander. Seeing him happy, I pulled 10,000 gold coins and imperial banknotes from my pocket and shoved them into his hands.
Take this, Your Highness. From this day forward, we're more than friends. We're brothers of the soul.
If you ever need anything, just give me the word.
Edward's eyes nearly popped out at the mountain of cash, yet he still tried to play it cool by declining.
Brothers are life, but money is just trash. If you refuse, you're basically spitting on our friendship, Silas.
Edward instantly tucked the gold away, tears of gratitude streaming down his face. You're a true brother.
I've got your back. But our bromance was cut short when the royal mentor, Reginald, stormed in looking furious.
This old fossil has hated me from day one, and he immediately launched into a harsh tirade.
Silas, His Majesty appointed you as the chief grand tutor.
Yet here you are, acting like a common circus clown with the future king. This is an absolute disgrace. I wasn't about to take that. Lord Scholar, is laughing a crime, or were you just born without a sense of humor?
Reginald shook with rage. I am your senior in this court, you insolent brat.
I am the prince's academic guide. Show some respect. I didn't budge and gave Edward a subtle nudge.
Edward found his spine for a second and piped up. Yeah, Silas is right. Reginald lost it, pointing a trembling finger at my nose while screaming insults. You're nothing but a nouveau-rich thug. Hanging out with these mutilated palace servants is a stain on our gentility.
Truly shameless. The servants nearby hung their heads, their spirits crushed by his cruelty. This was my golden opportunity. I switched to Oscar-winning mode, my eyes turning red as tears flowed perfectly. Reginald, shut your mouth. I roared with righteous fury. What gives you the right to look down on these people?
Who does the hardest work in this palace? Them. Do you think everyone was born with a silver spoon like you?
They sacrificed their bodies just to feed their families. Do you think they chose this life for fun? You call yourself a grand scholar. You've read the classics, but have zero compassion. You're not fit to teach a future king.
My words were like lightning, striking the heart of every single person in the room. The attendants wept openly, and even the prince's personal butler, Leo, was sobbing into his hands.
Reginald was stunned into silence, his face turning a sickly shade of purple. You're just twisting logic.
I won't waste my breath on a barbarian. With a huff, the old man stormed out in total defeat.
I turned to the dazed Edward with a gentle smile. Your Highness, here is your first lesson. If you want people to serve you willingly, you must first win their hearts with sincerity.
But the next morning, Edward came hobbling back. Brother, help! My father thrashed me again.
I need to escape this palace. My face fell. It seemed the Emperor was getting addicted to this parenting style. I couldn't say no to his begging, so I agreed to take him to a salon after Tessa disguised his face. I disguised him in common swordsman's gear. Then, with the humanoid weapon Brutus, the three of us swaggered out of the palace.
Aboard the elite cruise, Brutus, clad in a menacing guard uniform, sent the noble trash scattering.
Edward gawked like a country bumpkin, while Brutus and I shamelessly inhaled the luxury pastries.
As the ship glided into the river's center, the capital star diva, Isabella, began plucking her harp, enchanting the second floor.
Below, snobbish nobles recited poetry until Julian, the finance minister's brat, crashed our table.
Julian snapped his lace fan shut, a cold, mocking sneer twisting his face.
Lord Silas, mud belongs in the dirt. Dining with servants? Compose a poem to show us your noble spirit.
With a smirk, he shouted to command the entire room's attention.
Behold, the newly promoted Viscount of Edenbrook. Let us all witness the Viscount's supposed masterpiece.
Silence fell instantly. Every eye in the venue was a dagger of pure disdain and mockery.
I wiped my mouth, held back a lethal Brutus, and threw a heavy arm around Julian's neck.
I whispered with murderous intent. Kid, playing hero for Garrick, I'm not in the mood for games today.
Brutus, my weapon understood instantly, snapping open his heavy linen cloak. In the flickering candlelight,
Julian saw rows of gleaming throwing knives and poisoned daggers strapped to Brutus's chest.
Julian's soul nearly left his body. His knees buckled, and he began to stammer in absolute terror. "Viscount, it's a misunderstanding," I sneered. "Get lost before I change my mind."
He scrambled away like a rat, drawing whispers. I thought it was over, but a new shadow loomed. Lord Nelson, heir to the Duke of Normandy, stepped out to reclaim Julian's lost face.
He hauled the terrified Julian back and marched toward me with arrogant strides.
"Lord Silas," Nelson barked, snapping his fan shut. "This is a gathering of heroes. We await your masterpiece."
"Refuse, and you'll crush the spirits of every scholar in the Empire."
The crowd of minor nobles caught the fever. "Compose it. Give us a poem," they jeered.
I stared Nelson down. "You've got guts, brother." He just scoffed, looking at Brutus with disgust.
"Bringing a vulgar ogre here ruins our reputation." I simply raised an eyebrow in response.
"I'm surrounded by monsters. I need a rough shield. A refined man like you would have been slaughtered long ago."
Laughter erupted instantly. Nelson's face turned a sickly, envious shade of green.
Enough talk, Silas. If you have the balls, write! I sighed. Fine, you forced my hand.
Bring me a quill. I stepped to the desk, translating an ancient Eastern soul into a tragic Western sonnet.
Song of the autumn farewell. The winds wail through the skeletons of desolate oaks. The storm breaks. The evening bell tolls at the gates of a final goodbye. The red wine is bitter as ash. Distant sails urge reluctant souls toward the horizon.
Since time began, the passionate are left with nothing but the scars of pardon. In this frost-bitten autumn, where shall I wake? Under weeping willows or beneath a cold, dying moon? After this journey fades through the passing years, every beautiful moment will become nothing more than a hollow, empty setup.
My heart is a storm of romance, yet my pen suddenly stopped. Wait, what were the final lines? My mind went void.
I wasn't even this panicked during my past life exams. My brain was a total terrifying blank.
Hundreds of eyes locked onto my pen. Even Prince Edward gulped in sheer anticipation. I stood frozen, quill in hand. The atmosphere became suffocatingly awkward and dead silent.
Everyone held their breath, waiting for the ink to flow. Even Nelson was dripping with nervous sweat.
Lord Viscount, why the delay?
I didn't flinch. I slammed my hand onto the oak desk. Inspiration for this sonnet flowed through me like a divine, rushing spring.
It's a masterpiece for a poet laureate, but today I'll let you lot finish the final 2 lines.
Behold the art of the unsaid. The victor earns a golden ticket to the Royal Academy.
Stunned by my aura, the nobles bowed in unison, singing praises for my unwavering virtue. Julian, the finance minister's brat, turned a sickly shade of green, his teeth grinding in envy.
Then why not share the romance behind these verses, Silas? Or are you just hiding a lie?
My expression darkened, and if I refuse? Nelson's lip curled into a nasty sneer.
Without an origin story, it's all just a hollow fraud, making things very awkward for everyone. The air grew sharp as a blade, but I just laughed. Difficult? Then let's just quit.
The moment the words left my lips, Brutus roared to life, his power erupting like a volcano. With monstrous strength, he flipped the heavy mahogany table, slamming it down onto Julian and Nelson. They couldn't even scream before being crushed, and in one motion, Brutus and I leaped on top. Crown Prince Edward froze in sheer shock. Then his eyes sparked with wild joy as he joined the fray. Let's see who jumps higher. The 3 of us danced a chaotic rhythm on the table as agonized wails echoed from underneath.
The terrified nobles huddled in the shadows, trembling as they watched our savage performance.
Silas, you're dead! My father is the finance minister! You'll pay for this with your life! Julian's muffled threats only fueled my fire, and I began to bounce with even more fury. Edward's face flushed crimson with pure adrenaline. He was loving every second of the chaos. When the ship finally docked, the hall emptied instantly, as if everyone had seen a vengeful ghost.
Satisfied with the lesson, I hopped down. Lift it up, Brutus.
The 2 fools underneath were a bloody mess, barely clinging to consciousness after our brutal dance. I yanked Julian up by his greasy hair. You blew your chance, kid, he sobbed, completely broken.
Please, Lord Silas, have mercy on me. I tossed him aside and delivered a swift kick to Nelson's face, sending him into a slumber.
Vengeance felt sweet, but now it was time for the cleanup. These nobles live for their reputation, so let's give 'em a scandal. Strip 'em, Brutus. Brutus worked fast, peeling off their fancy velvet suits, leaving Julian face down in a heap. I stacked Nelson on top and drenched him in strong liquor, making the scene look truly intimate. A passing maid gasped in horror, her tray clattering to the floor in shock.
I ordered her to bring every servant from the kitchen, 30 people to witness the show.
The crowd stared at the 2 naked nobles while I put on a performance of heartbreak. Behold this filth! They've abandoned all virtue for a drunken, illicit affair. As the Grand Tutor, I cannot abide such blasphemous behavior. It's a disgrace to the gods. But since they're nobles, we must keep this secret for their sake. If a single word leaks, you'll answer to me. The servants exchanged confused, judging looks. They were clearly thinking, you called us here just for this? Are you insane?
I doused the lovers with ice water, waking them up to a circle of staring commoners.
Their faces drained of color as they tried to hide their shame.
Did you enjoy your little tryst? Julian nodded frantically, terrified of my devilish grin.
Good. I've memorized every servant's name in this room. If even one of them gets a scratch, I'm holding you responsible. Got it?
They gnashed their teeth, but had no choice. Now, how will you explain this to your fathers?
Julian sobbed through his tears. I just drank too much and had a small argument with you.
Satisfied, I helped them into their clothes. Now run along before you catch a cold. The two humiliated nobles scrambled off the ship like terrified rats.
Edward grinned, realizing the world outside the palace was far more exciting than he imagined.
The moment the crowd vanished, I ordered Brutus to break out the sacks. We scavenged every prime roast and pastry left on the table.
Certainly, Isabella's maid appeared, summoning me to the diva's private chambers. Still clutching my lute, I stepped into her glamorous boudoir.
Isabella posed seductively behind a sheer curtain, her fingers dancing across harp strings as she tried to charm me with music.
I had zero time for melodies. I pointed straight at her untouched snacks and demanded to know if she planned on eating.
When she declined, I swept every single treat into my bag and vanished without a second thought.
I left the capital's top socialite frozen in shock. Even as she cried about her pure heart, I was already long gone.
This young master only has eyes for leftovers. After disembarking the cruise, Edward and I took a stroll through the bustling streets. Edward was buzzing with questions about my ruthless tactics. I told him, letting a predator escape only guarantees a future bite.
As long as the shame is too great for him to admit publicly.
The capital will treat the scandal as if it never happened. Suddenly, Edward excitedly dumped half a sack of food into a beggar's bowl.
The man stared in utter disbelief at the massive mountain of leftovers suddenly sitting before him.
I stopped Edward instantly to teach him about society's dark side. Ahead, a blind beggar sat with a few meager copper coins.
I casually swiped the coins right into my sleeve. The blind man's eyes flew open, glaring at me with pure intensity. I held out both hands. Poor beggar, did you drop the copper coins in my left or the silver in my right?
Blinded by greed, he chose the right hand. Wrong answer. I'm confiscating everything for your dishonesty. The beggar froze, his facade crumbling, as a fierce, murderous look transformed his face.
Brutus stepped forward, flashing a hidden armory beneath his cloak. Terrified, the beggar immediately went back to playing blind and submissive.
Edward watched, mesmerized, before delivering 2 sharp kicks that sent even more hidden pennies flying from the scammer's rags.
With lightning speed, I snatched them all up. Moments later, we stumbled upon a beggar who appeared to have no legs. I walked over, grabbed his cracked wooden bowl, and emptied every last cent into my own sleeve.
Then I hurled the bowl as far as I could. Suddenly, a true miracle occurred.
The legless beggar miraculously grew limbs, sprinting after that bowl faster than a frightened rabbit.
Edward's worldview shattered instantly. Silas, you were right. I really was blind to the truth. How could you possibly know? I stood with a look of ancient wisdom. Long ago, when I was starving to death in Eden,
I led the weak and the desperate across the land to beg for our very survival.
We mastered every trick, from fake disabilities to elaborate pregnancy scams and heart-wrenching melodramas. I built a legendary beggars guild from nothing and crowned myself as its supreme president. I established a complex hierarchy of officers and enforcers. My viral song, Tears of the Gypsies, echoed across the entire province. These scammers are just playing games I invented. Hearing of my glorious past, Edward bowed down in absolute admiration.
Meanwhile, Julian and Nelson limped back to the finance minister's mansion, battered and broken.
The moment they crossed the threshold, a murderous glint flashed in Julian's eyes. He pointed at Nelson and screamed for his death, venting all his bottled-up rage on his own loyal lackeys. Guards swung heavy wooden clubs with lethal intent, specifically targeting Nelson's face until he looked like a bloated purple mess. Minister Giles stormed out, alarmed by the chaos. Seeing his son's pathetic state, he demanded to know who was responsible. Julian collapsed against his father's legs, wailing like a terrified child. Heartbroken, Giles demanded to know if Silas was the culprit, but Julian, haunted by the memory of being stripped bare, remained stubborn. He claimed it was just a verbal spat. That lie earned him a thunderous slap across the face from his father.
Giles roared in fury, calling him useless trash who didn't even have the guts to stand up for himself.
With a brutal kick, he sent Julian spinning and ordered him locked away before planning a ruthless impeachment in the council. At midnight, the mangled Nielsen was tossed into the street like a bag of trash,
only to be discovered by the local fabric merchant, Chandler.
Back at my manor, the beautiful Bianca was still working as a lowly maid, trembling under my daily temper.
Seeing Nelson's state, her mind raced with wild theories. She wondered if I ignored her because I lacked manly vigor. Overwhelmed with bitterness, she rushed back to the manor just as I was returning from my day's work. I pulled out a few saliva-covered copper coins and tossed them to her as her hard-earned commission. Clutching those few copper coins, she burst into tears of joy and bolted inside. I laughed. Is making money really that exciting?
2 days later at court, Chief Stewart Godfrey recited my borrowed poem, Autumn Farewell Song, with soul-stirring passion.
The entire assembly of officials stood there, completely entranced by the flow of every verse.
Prime Minister Ward was moved to tears, declaring the lines were a divine gift from the god of Renaissance himself.
Emperor Richard beamed with pride, his face glowing as he turned to me. Silas, my boy, we're all dying to know.
Why are there 2 lines missing? Every eye in the room locked onto me. Inside, I was screaming in panic.
I only remembered half the poem. Beside me, Crown Prince Edward was smirking, just waiting for me to humiliate myself.
Time to put my world-class acting skills to the test. I took a deep, dramatic breath.
My eyes welled with fake tears as I put on a mask of tragic sorrow. Your Majesty!
I toiled tirelessly for the people of Edenbrook, only to realize that true perfection in this world is always flawed.
After battling a fever for 3 days and nights, a profound truth finally dawned upon my soul.
Like the legendary Venus, there is divinity in the incomplete. I purposely left those blanks to capture the beauty of imperfection.
The ministers collectively rolled their eyes. They couldn't believe I was trying to sell them this load of absolute nonsense.
Ha ha ha! I can't believe I'm actually spinning this ridiculous excuse into a philosophical breakthrough.
Yet Richard actually looked impressed. Soon the ministers were nodding along, convinced my missing lines were a stroke of genius.
Suddenly, Finance Minister Giles erupted in fury, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face and cursing loudly.
Your Majesty, I impeach Silas for the brutal assault on my son Julian. I just blinked, looking like a total saint.
Your Majesty, this is a blatant lie. We merely had a spirited, intellectual debate. I am completely innocent.
Giles dragged his son and witnesses forward. Richard's gaze turned icy as he stared Julian down.
Well, Julian, did Silas strike you or not? I leaned back, acting perfectly composed and leisurely.
Your Majesty, Lord Julian was quite drunk. We were just playing the Roman pyramid with wine glasses. Right, Julian?
At the mention of stacking glasses, Julian began shaking like a leaf, clearly remembering his naked humiliation. If he admitted to the fight, his shameful secret would be exposed to the entire world.
Julian gritted his teeth, looking like he was about to burst into tears of pure agony and despair.
We were just playing the pyramid. Silas never touched me.
Giles looked like he'd been struck by a bolt of lightning.
His eyes nearly popped out of his head. I thought the old man was going to cough up blood right then.
Sensing it was time to wrap this up, I waved a hand dismissively, playing the role of the bigger man.
It's just a misunderstanding. I'm used to being the target of rumors. Suddenly, the ministers looked at me with newfound respect.
They actually thought I was noble. Delighted, Richard kicked the humiliated Giles and his son out of the court.
Later, the Emperor summoned me to his private study. The tea sales have plummeted, Silas. Any bright ideas?
We'd milked the nobles dry, and the luxury tea market was completely tapped out. I already had a scheme ready. It's simple, Your Majesty. We just need to segment the market.
We'll sell longevity tea to the elders, rebranded as the dew of the Holy Grail. They'll pay anything for it.
The ladies get siren song for beauty, and the knights get blood of the war god for stamina. Make the packaging elite.
We'll weave epic myths around them and use socialites to build the hype. It's all about the prestige.
Then we'd drop the price and harvest the next wave of customers. Richard's eyes gleamed with pure greed.
Handle this, and you'll get a 10% cut. Richard looked at me like I was his favorite gold mine.
You really are a genius at making gold. Too bad the national treasury is still bleeding dry of grain.
Got any miracles for the grain shortage? I let out a heavy sigh.
Without legendary crops like potatoes or sweet potatoes, agriculture was a dead end. I could only shake my head. Suddenly, Godfrey burst into the room, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Your Majesty, it's a disaster!
The princess, she's not going to make it. Richard's face went pale with terror as his expression changed.
He bolted toward the inner palace like a man possessed. I just stood there, completely stunned by the news. Edward was panicking too. I quickly grabbed his attendant Leo before he could run off. I promised the eunuch his manhood would regrow if he led the way. We sprinted toward the princess's chamber.
Richard and Edward wore masks of pure despair. I peered over the massive velvet bed, and the sight left me paralyzed.
The princess lay there, her skin pale as marble and lips like crushed cherries, even while gripped by a deadly fever.
She was a legendary beauty, the absolute peak of innocence and allure.
Richard cried out, 10 years! Why hasn't this cursed illness been cured after 10 long years?
I glared at the royal physician who'd supposedly treated her for a decade and snatched his silk collar.
10 years and no cure? I hissed. He scoffed. It's rare lung consumption. A low-ranking noble like you wouldn't understand. My gaze sharpened instantly. This arrogant fool was hiding something behind his pride. I focused on physician Hugo, the man treating her lung disease for 10 years. I couldn't believe this quack hadn't killed her yet, despite draining her family with useless herbs for a decade. My perspective shifted. To keep a patient alive while giving the wrong treatment for 10 years?
This old man is a divine doctor in his own twisted way. Under my glare, Hugo trembled.
Ignoring him, I dragged Crown Prince Edward into the hall. He leaned against a pillar, his eyes bloodshot.
Victoria is my everything. If God takes her, I'm lost. Before I could speak, he snapped his head up, staring intensely. Silas, tell me, do you want a wife or not? I was totally baffled.
Edward rushed on. Ancient texts speak of a divine blessing marriage. They'll give Victoria to you.
We'll use a pure marriage's holy light to banish this demon. I'd never trust another noble, but I trust you.
I looked at the sky in disbelief. Shoving a dying princess onto me? Talk about returning a favor with a curse.
I sighed. Your Highness, if weddings cured diseases, death wouldn't exist in this world.
Edward's spirit broke completely. He grabbed my shoulders and began shaking me like a madman.
I shoved him back. Get a grip. I have one method, but the chances of success are nearly zero.
There is a divine medicine called penicillin. It could cure anything.
Edward's eyes sparked with life. Excellent. Tell me how to find it. Just say the word.
We sprinted back to the palace, gathered baskets of oranges, and tossed them into a dark, damp cellar.
Once the blue mold bloomed, we boiled wheat for a culture medium and carefully selected the bluest strains to cultivate.
After a week of fermentation, I purified the mixture with olive oil, charcoal, vinegar, and alkaline water from the kitchen.
No filter paper available.
I used sun-sterilized premium toilet paper instead. To ensure rigor, I set up 27 experimental groups.
I boiled every tool at extreme temperatures. Even the syringes were custom forged by the royal silversmiths.
For 15 days, I didn't sleep. My eyes were bloodshot and raw.
Finally, 27 silver bowls of penicillin sat before me. Pride surged through my weary heart.
What's next, Silas? Edward gulped. Bring in the death row inmates, I replied. 3 days later.
Over 50 notorious criminals were rounded up in the capital's secret royal dungeon. With my hands behind my back, I looked at them coldly. Today, you'll test a miracle medicine.
Report your symptoms honestly. You'll each receive 20 gold coins for your participation.
Succeed, and you're pardoned. But one bandit screamed, I object! You're just a demon trying to kill us!
Shut his mouth, I barked. The jailer delivered 2 heavy slaps with an ironclad glove. Silence fell instantly. I nodded in satisfaction and prepared to take action myself.
The first was an intravenous injection. My hands trembled as cold sweat drenched my back.
For the second, I just had him drop his pants for a gluteal injection. Much easier. I moved through 50 men.
An hour later, Edward burst into the dungeon, frantic and shouting.
Silas, did it work? The torches flickered as I turned slowly, my voice heavy with a profound, chilling sorrow.
They're all dead. Edward was thunderstruck.
I wordlessly ripped away the rough curtain. A sea of twisted corpses filled the cells. Some died convulsing violently, while others lay in their own vomit. Their ends were gruesome.
The guards trembled with terror. They looked at me as if I were the king of hell himself.
Terror filled the room. Edward collapsed, tears streaming as his world crumbled.
Could this tragedy be reversed? I pulled him up amidst the sea of corpses.
A bitter, dark smile escaped my lips. The jailer gasped in pure horror.
The devil was grinning, 50 lives poisoned, yet he looked completely satisfied.
From that day, the legend of the capital's Poison King was born.
Penicillin failed. The princess withered, while Edward vanished into his own grief.
My title felt empty. It was time for a personal investigation.
I bribed my way in, silencing a maid with a heavy gold note.
We headed for the royal garden, the princess's favorite haunt.
The scent of blooming flowers hit me like a physical wave.
The siren sigh, she whispered, the princess's favorite, blooming year-round.
She loved these blossoms. Lung disease? What a pathetic, deadly joke.
This wasn't a plague, it was a severe pollen allergy.
Had I known, that penicillin bloodbath would never happened.
I sprinted to Edward, screaming the truth at his hollow, grieving face.
The princess can be saved. Edward looked up, his eyes filled with confusion.
You'll marry my sister to break the curse? Marry her? Hell no.
I dragged him to a room, explaining the science of allergies entirely.
He didn't understand the words, but he felt my absolute conviction.
Uproot it all, he roared. Then we encountered the slimy chief physician Hugo.
What's in that pot? Edward demanded. Hugo bowed with a greasy smile.
Mysterious mandrake from the New World. It costs 2,000 gold coins.
I sneered. 10 years of your cures have only brought her closer to death.
Hugo trembled, cold sweat pouring down his deceptive, aging face.
Edward's boot sent Hugo flying. The brass pot shattered against the floor.
I moved to stop him, but my eyes caught something in the mud.
My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs like a drum.
That slender root, that sweet, familiar aroma. It was a sweet potato. A god-tier crop, being boiled as a common tonic by this idiot.
I pounced like a starved beast, gripping Hugo's throat with lethal intent.
Where did you find this? I roared. Are there any more left?
Edward pulled me back. I let go, my heart dancing with pure joy.
We've struck gold. The Empire's fate is about to change forever.
I ate the mud-covered root. It was bland, but undeniably a sweet potato.
Edward stared, dumbfounded. What illness does that dirty root actually cure?
It cures poverty and hunger, I barked, hauling Hugo back to his feet.
To the pharmacy. Hugo led us to a velvet-lined box in shame.
3 small sweet potatoes lay inside. This, I whispered, is the future. 1 acre yields thousands of pounds. This is the key to absolute peace.
Edward's eyes bulged. He clutched the box like it held the sun itself.
I turned my gaze toward Simon, the officer who sourced these treasures.
He spoke of a foreign merchant at the port of Solis.
He mentioned a yellow whiskered root he ignored. Yellow bumps? Whiskers?
That was corn, you absolute fools. You missed the greatest treasure of all.
I fought the urge to scream, leaning into Simon with a terrifying grin.
2,000 gold for this? Simon trembled as I smirked.
Just look at what the Crown Prince is cradling.
Spill it! How much did this garbage actually cost?
Simon's teeth chattered. Two silver coins, he confessed.
He even hoarded sweet potatoes. I hit the jackpot.
Empty your pockets. Send everything to the prince's palace.
Simon sobbed, handing over 2 massive imperial gold notes.
I didn't spend a penny. I swiped them instantly.
I've got your back. Outside, I handed Edward half. Silas, what's this? Edward asked, looking totally bewildered.
Recovered loot, I claimed. Edward fumed at the corruption.
Where's the rest? I patted my sleeve. Saving it.
With the goods secured, I rushed to see Richard.
Majesty, the princess just has a simple pollen allergy.
Keep her away from flowers and she'll recover 100%.
Godfrey looked murderous, but Richard was absolutely overjoyed.
Incredible merit, Silas. Name your reward right now.
I need leave for Edenbrook. The prince is distracted.
Plus, I need to oversee my high-end tea empire. Richard, smelling the gold, granted my leave immediately.
Edward tried to tag along, but I stopped him.
The poisoning scandal is about to explode. Stay here.
You're my human shield. Don't let me die, Prince.
Edward pined as I escaped to Edenbrook with potatoes.
After a grueling, bumpy journey across the kingdom, we arrived. Tessa barfed, but the air felt amazing.
I'm back. A peasant saw me and fled screaming.
Suddenly, everyone I saw started sprinting toward the city.
A rebellion? No, the gates were overflowing with people.
Austin led a crowd of kids clutching wildflowers.
A giant banner welcomed the great Lord Silas home.
Welcome home, the kids screamed at the top volume.
Wait, this is my own trick from back then.
Enough! I'm not some dead guy in a parade.
The kids cried, but the citizens cheered even louder.
It's him, that beautiful cursing. Insult me again, Lord.
My people are all total masochists. This is ridiculous.
Austin reported that literacy rates were skyrocketing in town.
The streets are clean. Garbage sorting is a success.
A play about a crazy lord is a hit.
But the actors got beat up by the fans.
We've perfected bubble-free glass production, my lord.
Excellent. I slammed my research notes onto the table.
Make me telescopes. Start the medical experiments on animals.
Austin nodded frantically and continued his detailed report.
My lord, a swarm of rats has breached our city walls lately.
6 are abyssal cultists, while 5 serve the finance minister, Giles. What a bunch of pathetic low-tier schemes.
Drag them in. 11 captives entered as Austin barked, "State your mission."
The 11 snapped to attention, roaring like elite knights. They pledged their lives to making Edenbrook the Empire's greatest jewel.
A civilized paradise overflowing with eternal glory.
Those cultists even vowed to offer their very blood for our land's future.
I glared at Austin. I was gone for days, and you've already weaponized the propaganda?
Austin sweated buckets, swearing nothing changed. These heretics are just naturally high on life and loyalty. They work the quarries like demons, keeping only enough coin for basic bread.
They pay the rest in taxes. This is insanity. Send these psychos to the monastery for a total mental reset.
Teach them to be lazy bums. I won't have them corrupting my normal citizens.
Giles's 5 spies were weeping. Their leader sobbed, "Viscount, we lived like stray dogs back in the capital."
Edenbrook finally showed us what living means. We actually get meat soup every single day.
We aren't leaving. One brother already left to bring his mother here for good.
I chuckled. My kingdom's luxury is the ultimate weapon, after handling those turncoats.
I heard Oswald, that disgraced former inspector, had actually moved into our elite district. The old dog spends every night chasing girls at the Silver Moon Tavern.
He even writes trashy romance plays and forces the tavern girls to perform them.
I hauled him to the hall. Oswald knelt, shaking like a leaf before me.
A humble peasant greets the Viscount. The old fox sure learned his place quickly.
Time to apply pressure. Oswald, you pocketed a fortune during your corrupt days, didn't you?
I'm the prince's mentor now, and I don't tolerate filth. But before I could finish, Oswald whipped out a massive stack of gold notes, trembling as he laid them down. "My lord, here are 7,600 gold coins from my illegal loot. Plus the 500 gold coins of hush money. The old dog learned to bark early."
I tossed the 500 back. Take it and keep your mouth shut in my land.
To maximize his use, I assigned him a special role in the dungeon. He'll interrogate prisoners through song. Suddenly, a bizarre Abba Abba sound echoed from the corner.
I turned. A mute stood there. Rufus, my guard, stepped up to translate.
That's old William, the mute bartender. He lost his voice singing on the streets, so I hired him.
He says if Oswald can't sing, he's happy to give the man lessons.
I gasped, staring at Rufus. You actually understood what he was saying?
Rufus smirked.
I just read their eyes and the sounds they make. It helped me solve that local abuse case last month.
Holy cow! A living, breathing, universal translator. Those foreign merchants at the port were just complaining about language barriers.
This talent is pure gold. Rufus, you're coming to the capital with me.
After a few days, my precious sweet potatoes were safely planted in the Lord's private fertile fields.
We even managed to craft some basic microscopes and magnifying glasses.
They were crude, but they could spot microorganisms in the water. Before departing, I had the workshops rush out a massive batch of modern sanitary pads.
People here treat periods like a curse, using filthy rags or ash. The church even calls it unclean. Talk about primitive and unsanitary.
I'll market these to the elite noble ladies in the capital first.
I'll shift the social culture while making a massive profit.
With a carriage full of pads, I headed back to my capital mansion.
At dinner, a literal mountain of pads sat on the table. Looking at these wingless, string-tied contraptions, I was lost in thought.
Seriously, how do you even use this? I asked for some expert guidance.
The moment I spoke, Brutus and Rufus vanished into the shadows.
Tessa and Bianca turned beet red, hiding their faces in sheer embarrassment. My lord, it's mortifying.
Tessa stomped her feet in panic. I slammed the table, hating their stubbornness.
This is about vital health care. Now, Tessa, explain what these 4 strings are for.
She mumbled about tying them. Suddenly it clicked. Ancient people didn't wear underwear.
New business idea, silk lingerie. But their constant fidgeting was really testing my patience.
Effective today, every woman in this mansion gets 3 free pads daily.
It's mandatory. Plus, I'll need detailed feedback on any leaks or issues.
Tessa, you're in charge of distribution. She looked ready to faint from shame.
Bianca stared in horror, her eyes screaming pervert. Suddenly, Edward burst in, frantic.
He waved a letter excitedly. Silas, the whole capital is in an absolute uproar.
The news about your poison trial has exploded. I just yawned and stretched lazily. Let it blow. Who cares? Follow me to the palace. I've got treasures to show.
At the prince's palace, I barely sat down before that eunuch attendant appeared.
Leo's eyes sparkled as he stared. His gaze was so intense, it actually creeped me out.
He's clearly still hoping I can help him regrow his lost equipment.
Muffling my laughter, I handed him a brass magnifying glass. Behold, the mirror of restored glory. Whatever's small, just look through this. It'll look bigger instantly.
Leo snatched it and ran off drooling. Edward leaned in, skeptical. Silas, does that actually work?
I smirked, pulling out another glass and pointing it at a silver teacup. The cup doubled in size. Edward was stunned. He grabbed the glass and looked around in awe. Incredible! Father struggles to see. This'll make reading those council papers a breeze.
How wholesome. I took him outside to show him the true power of focused sunlight.
While we were deep in our science experiment, Leo came sprinting back.
He was wailing. My lord, it's useless. It looks bigger, but it's still missing pieces.
I patted his shoulder solemnly. Leo, life can't always be a perfect 10 out of 10.
Optically, looking big is being big. Just cherish your life. Use this whenever you feel lonely.
Leo wailed in fury, calling me a liar before he bolted away.
Edward was dying of laughter, but then he turned serious. The court was eerily quiet lately.
No attacks or complaints. I bet those old council fossils are planning something huge.
I shrugged it off. Is the princess okay? She's recovered and wants to thank you personally.
Let's go then. Edward gave me a suspicious look, clearly worried about my intentions.
We reached the chambers, and Princess Victoria emerged with effortless grace. She looked radiant after her recovery, the absolute peak of royal beauty and charm.
I acted cool, checking the garden while preparing my legendary flirting techniques.
The princess must stay healthy. You should definitely drink more hot chamomile tea.
Edward rolled his eyes, mocking me. Drink tea and then what? I totally blanked.
Add honey?
The silence that followed was incredibly awkward. Saving me, Victoria pointed to my bag. Lord Viscount, is that a local specialty?
Relieved, I quickly opened it. Exactly, princess. Please try some of our candied nuts.
But then I froze. That klutz Tessa had hidden some pads right under the nut jar. Edward grabbed one instantly, inspecting the 4 strings with a look of pure triumph.
I've got it. Father mentioned we need to guard against the plague.
These strings must be for tying this over your face as a protective mask, right?
He almost slapped it onto his face. Cold sweat poured as I snatched it back. Are you insane?
If you wear it, how can I sell this to noble ladies? Victoria leaned in, eyes sparking with curiosity.
My lord, what is this? Seeing her interest, I steeled my heart for the awkward explanation.
This is a pad of purity for women's monthly cycles. The air in the room instantly turned to ice.
Victoria's face turned beet red to her ears as she looked away. The maids blushed, too shy to breathe.
Edward shrieked, threw the pad down, and pointed a trembling finger at me while cursing my name.
Silas, you pervert! What noble carries this? My mental defenses crumbled under his ridiculous accusation.
I rolled up my sleeves, eyes blazing with fury. A pervert? You think I enjoy this?
Do you think a man like me carries this for fun? I'm doing this for every woman in the Empire.
I pointed at the discarded pad, my voice booming through the hall like thunder against stone.
Do you know the agony women face using dirty rags and ash, the infections, the suffering?
They die and get branded unclean by the church. As their lord, how could I just watch?
I seek health and dignity for all. Edward just sneered. Such high-sounding words for a hypocrite.
Don't pretend. Your Edenbrook runs red light districts. Is there dignity in a brothel, Silas?
I laughed from pure rage, getting right in his face. What do you actually know about it?
Secret brothels are run by gangs who discard the weak. My girls aren't forced into shadows.
I run official districts with fair prices and regular medical checkups by expert herbalists. If they want out, they leave with guaranteed jobs at my textile factories. I give them a future.
I'm crushing the criminal's path. These pads are single-use and hygienic, a revolution in health.
I, Silas, am risking my entire reputation to promote this. Am I truly the one in the wrong? My speech was legendary, radiating the light of a true visionary. Every maid present looked on, mesmerized.
Victoria looked up, her eyes twinkling like stars. Lord Silas, you are truly righteous. I misjudged your heart.
I'll help you promote this in court. I seized the chance immediately. That would be an honor, Princess. Thank you, Princess. Your support means everything to the women of this land. My factory specifically hires women, giving them independence. They will never be mere appendages to men again.
This feminist declaration stunned Victoria. Deeply moved, she signaled her maid to bring out a heavy jewelry box.
It was filled with her secret life savings. My lord, take this and build your factories at once.
I didn't hesitate for a second, stuffing the notes into my sleeve. A true lord never declines.
Princess, you are an angel. From now on, I will provide all your pads for life.
By the way, it is 10 copper for nobles and 3 for maids. Don't forget the price.
Edward's jaw dropped. This guy is a master scammer. He quickly grabbed my sleeve, eyes gleaming. Silas, I am in. I gave him a side eye. Wait, weren't you just calling me a pervert?
Edward did not even blink, his expression shifting to one of heroic duty. I have had a change of heart.
As Crown Prince, I must lead. Every maid and even attendants with hemorrhoids will use these.
The families of every official in the Privy Council must buy them. It is their sacred duty. Refusal is immoral. We will give them a discount, 15 copper coins each. He was a natural shark. Watching him dance and calculate profits, I gave a mental thumbs up. This kid has real potential.
The next morning at court, with a telescope tucked in my belt, I casually joined the ranks. Suddenly, Finance Minister Giles stormed forward, shouting, "Your Majesty, I must speak."
I impeach Silas for 3 crimes. First, illegally expanding his castle walls beyond his rank.
Second, for the forced abduction of serfs from neighboring territories into his own lands.
Third, for failing to pay tithes for 7 years. He must be punished. I remained completely unfazed.
Is that all? Just these dusty old complaints? King Richard looked at me. Silas, your defense.
Giles panicked. Your Majesty, I have a witness. A round, chubby figure was dragged into the hall.
It was Thomas of Oaktown. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned blood red with hatred.
I was Oaktown's mayor. Silas lied, stealing our vibrant youth while dumping the old and sickly into my territory.
The scheme worked.
Those youths returned, flaunting white flour and roast meat, living in lazy luxury while eating until they slept.
The minister's skin crawled. This was like fattening livestock just to mock the neighboring farmers' empty pens.
"Too cruel," Thomas wailed, tears streaming down his face. "My people grew desperate with envy, and within a year, every youth fled to Edenbrook."
Oaktown collapsed into a tiny village. When I tried resisting, Silas just dumped more frail elders on us.
These broken souls praised Edenbrook's glory daily, making even more citizens desert my land.
Now I'm just a manor lord. The hall erupted in laughter at the mayor's pathetic downfall.
Godfrey turned purple, resisting a laugh, as Thomas suffered a total emotional breakdown.
He even piped sewage directly into our river, poisoning our only water source every single day.
Our water became undrinkable filth.
Then he had the audacity to sell us his well water. Your Majesty, he is a devil.
Pity filled the room. Having such a wicked neighbor was a curse from 10 past lives.
I smirked. Shouldn't you thank me? Managing a manor is far easier for someone like you.
As Thomas fumed, I knelt before King Richard with a perfectly solemn expression.
Your Majesty, those people weren't abducted. They chose to follow a better life. And that sewage? It is fermented high-grade fertilizer for the fields.
Other lords would kill for it. Why blame me when these nobles can't even feed their people?
Lies, Giles roared. If you cared, you would have sent gold and grain instead.
Why steal his subjects? What is your real goal?
I pointed at Thomas, radiating pure, righteous fury.
Look at him. This man is a gluttonous parasite with a head full of nothing but grease.
While he feasts, his people starve. How could I trust a greedy leech with my resources?
Toss him in a dungeon for a month. If he is still fat, then I am guilty. Thomas turned pale.
"I was born this way," he cried. Ignoring him, I struck a dramatic pose, sounding utterly heartbroken.
My heart bleeds for the Empire. To think my loyalty would be met with such accusations. I study the classics to uphold divine truth and protect the innocent from such lies. My only wish is to secure the Empire's glory and bring eternal peace to every citizen.
I dream of a day when every soul in this land shares in our prosperity.
Richard slammed the table, his face flushed with excitement. Magnificent! Silas is truly a pillar of this great empire.
The ministers recoiled in disgust. That shameless smake was actually pretending to be a holy knight.
Sensing the shift, Giles desperately played his final trump card.
"And what of his tax fraud, Majesty?" I placed a hand over my heart.
Every coin went into schools and roads to educate the poor. My treasury is practically empty, Your Majesty.
I will take the punishment for the missing taxes, Richard sighed, eager to end this charade.
Given his great service, Silas is fined just 1 year's salary.
Case closed. But then Scholar Reginald lunged forward, his eyes burning with murderous intent. I have a report! Silas murdered 54 royal prisoners with poison!
I beg you to execute him. The room fell into a deathly silence.
Ministers backed away, staring at me like a monster. Reginald wailed, his face a mess of tears.
He dragged the prince to the dungeon and used alchemical toxins to slaughter over 50 souls.
More chillingly, he crushed their chests, desecrating their corpses long after they had perished.
He even forced the crown prince to attack Chief Physician Hugo.
I implore you, Majesty, punish this bloodthirsty butcher at once.
Richard glared at me, his face grim. Silas, explain yourself. I let out a weary sigh.
I did poison 54 subjects, but only to save our princess. Though the trial failed, her recovery is a miracle.
Reginald sneered. If the medicine failed, how is she cured? And what about your abuse of the corpses?
I just sighed. In medicine, that's called CPR. Rhythmic chest compressions are meant to revive the dead.
Regarding those 54 monsters, Your Majesty, the first was the infamous Mad Dog Font.
A beast who slaughtered an entire noble house, showing no mercy even to a 3-year-old girl.
Followed by 3 cannibals who hunted infants for immortality and butchered 2 pregnant women.
These scumbags deserved to burn at the stake. Using them for medical trials was far too kind. The hall fell silent. Ministers shivered as the horrific truth sank in.
These demons deserve death. King Richard finally calmed his fury.
Their deaths were earned, yet bypassing the High Court remains a grave legal violation.
Saving the princess balances your crimes. But Reginald hissed, what about the assault on physician Hugo?
He mocked the law. Lord Scholar, do you have any defense left for this madness?
He'll answer you. Crown Prince Edward marched down the marble steps, his expression cold as ice.
Reginald fumed at their closeness. Edward ignored the past, turning his gaze toward his royal father.
Father, Reginald claims my mentor led me astray. Now I shall recite the sacred classics for you.
Taking a steady breath, Edward began a recitation that would silence every critic in the room.
Line after line of obscure higher Latin scriptures flowed perfectly from his lips without a single stumble.
The court gasped. The prince, once considered a slow learner, had undergone a legendary transformation.
Overjoyed, Richard tested him with deep theology. Edward answered flawlessly, standing tall with newfound pride.
Father, this wisdom was gifted to me by mentor Silas.
I struck Hugo because that greedy dog spent 2,000 gold on a plant tuber worth only 2 silver. Edward unleashed his full fury. I investigated the palace's lies, sending knights to uncover the hidden truth.
Eggs priced at 10 silver inside cost mere copper outside. The corruption within these walls is staggering.
Last year, the palace's food expenses reached a staggering 80,000 gold coins.
We only needed 8,000. These parasites in fine robes have stolen 70,000 gold from our crown.
I saw the truth while walking incognito among the common people.
They starve while we feast. I gave my own coin, but it's nothing against this ocean of misery.
If we crushed this corruption, our people wouldn't have to suffer such a bitter existence.
Silence gripped the grand hall. Watching Edward, I felt a surge of pride. The boy has become a king. Tears welled in Richard's eyes. He gripped Edward's shoulders, his voice cracking. Did you truly do this?
Yes, while Silas was away, I handled the investigation personally to prove my worth.
Richard turned away to hide his emotion, wiping tears before facing his subjects with a roar.
Look well, lords. This is my son, the future lion of our empire.
The ministers bowed low, chanting praises for the wisdom of their young crown prince.
Prime Minister Ward wept, admitting he'd misjudged me. Silas's loyalty was truly absolute.
Richard roared for Godfrey to purge the corruption. For teaching the prince, Silas shall be rewarded.
Grant him the royal purple cloak. Exile Reginald. The academy now belongs solely to Silas. Furthermore, the prince is free to leave the palace to watch over our people.
Reginald collapsed, his world ending. I pulled a telescope from my belt and held it high.
Your Majesty, I offer you a divine artifact of unmatched power.
This is the Empire's Eye. It reveals enemy banners miles away with perfect clarity.
I wish Valoria's march toward glory to be eternal and prosperous.
Richard tried the device outside, stunned by its magic. To him, this was a gift from heaven. We'll crush every enemy formation. Silas, name your price. My expression remained humble. This belongs to the craftsmen of Edenbrook, sire. I seek no personal reward.
Richard laughed, gifting Edenbrook 100 gold. Mass production begins now for the Royal Knights. I hit the jackpot. I fought to hide my grin while thanking him for his royal favor.
The moment court ended, Edward dragged me back to the palace in a frantic rush.
Brother, how could you hide such a treasure from me? I reclaimed the telescope first. Relax, where did all your gold go while I was away?
With a proud smirk, Edward produced a booklet stained with red handprints.
I saw the poor starving in the slums, so I gave them every coin I had.
Behold, the scroll of gratitude, signed by the commoners themselves.
They see me as a superhero, Silas. Looking at this naive prince, I was speechless. He just threw money away.
Of course they love you. You are the kingdom's biggest pushover.
Edward leaned in, rubbing his palms. When does our purity pad project start turning a profit? I'm broke again.
He was hooked on charity, but at the mention of profits, my own spirit caught fire.
With Reginald gone, the crown prince was finally free to roam the capital.
Those wealthy nobles were about to become my personal ATMs. Tell me, any big festivals coming soon?
Profit! Edward's eyes blazed like twin suns as he practically jumped into my lap. Silas, the Midsummer Valentine's Festival is almost here.